China lied about its population, not by thousands, not by millions, by over 100 million people. That's not a typo. Beijing fabricated enough people to fill a country the size of Japan, and now the truth is collapsing faster than its skyline. At exactly 3:25 p.m. on August 27, 2021, 15 empty skyscrapers in Kunming were leveled in a single demolition. Over 4.6 tons of explosives reduced these ghost towers to rubble, a perfect symbol of China's hollowed-out future. Because this isn't just the housing crisis, or a birth rate slump, or another economic slowdown. This is the total unmasking of a global superpower built on lies. According to the latest data from Statista in 2024, China's birth rate hit an extinction-level low, 6.77 births per 1,000 people. That's fewer babies than funerals, around 60 to 80 million empty apartments, skyrocketing youth unemployment, a shrinking workforce, an aging population with inadequate pension support. And now 70% of Chinese families have their life savings tied up in properties that are now basically worth less and less every year. Imagine waking up tomorrow and your home is worth almost half of what you paid. Now multiply that nightmare by hundreds of millions of families. For decades, the world feared China's rise. But as you'll soon see, this unstoppable juggernaut was always a mirage, a demographic Ponzi scheme on borrowed time, and the bill is finally coming due. In this video, we'll expose how China fabricated its population numbers to inflate its global power, why its workforce is imploding and taking the economy with it, and what actually happens when a supposed superpower begins rotting from the inside out. The collapse isn't coming, it's already here. Let's begin with the bombshell. China has been cooking its population books for decades. According to Professor Yi Fushan, a leading expert on Chinese demographics, the government has been overestimating its population by at least 10%. Why would they do this? Simple. Bigger population numbers made China look stronger, more productive, and more economically impressive on the world stage. China wanted to project strength, says Yi. Artificially inflated population figures made their GDP per capita look lower, their military power look greater, and their economic miracles seem more miraculous. But the truth is finally breaking through the facade. In 2022, China announced its first population decline in 60 years. But according to Yi's research published in a 2023 study cited by Newsweek, the population actually started shrinking back in 2018, 4 years earlier than officially admitted. The deception wasn't small or accidental. Internal Chinese documents leaked to Western researchers suggest that local officials were pressured to inflate population figures to meet political targets. Birth records were fabricated, deaths went unreported, ghost people populated spreadsheets and databases. Why? Because admitting population decline would mean admitting failure. But the consequences of this lie are now hitting like a tsunami. Production figures that assumed a workforce of a certain size? Wrong. Housing demand projections? Complete fantasy. Economic growth targets? Built on quicksand. The impact has become increasingly hard to ignore. While Beijing continues to project confidence, setting a 2025 GDP growth target of around 5%, most international forecasts paint a more sobering picture, anticipating growth closer to 4 to 4.7%. Long-term projections are even lower, with many analysts expecting China's average growth to dip into the 3% range by the end of the decade. That growing gap between what Beijing promises and what actually happens, it's not just a red flag, it's a siren. More and more experts are calling out the cracks in China's economic fairy tale. But this deception goes far beyond just doctored spreadsheets and faked statistics. And that's where this story becomes a nightmare. Here's something you won't believe. China's birth rate is now lower than Japan's, a country notorious for its demographic crisis. Recent data from Statista shows China recorded just 6.77 births per 1,000 people in 2024, nearly 50% below replacement level. For context, a healthy society needs about 2.1 children per woman just to maintain its population. China isn't even close, and this isn't just a blip. The macro trends data paints a shocking picture. After decades of slowing growth, China's population has now entered negative territory, shrinking by 0.03% in 2024 and continuing to accelerate downward. The annual percentage change graph shows a clear, dramatic decline that demographers project will only worsen. But didn't China end its infamous one-child policy, you might ask? They did in 2016, and absolutely nothing changed. The government expected a baby boom. Instead, they got a baby bust. Young Chinese couples took a hard look at sky-high housing costs, brutal work hours, and expensive education requirements and said, no thanks. The situation is so dire that the Chinese government has implemented increasingly desperate measures to boost birth rates. In major cities like Shanghai, they've introduced baby bonuses of up to 10,000 yuan, about $1,400. They've created tax incentives for families with multiple children. They've even launched propaganda campaigns with slogans like "Marriage and reproduction are family responsibilities." None of it is working. As Bloomberg reported in early 2024, China's birth rate continued falling even after couples were allowed to have up to 3 children. But hold on, it gets even worse. According to projections from Visual Capitalist, China's population could shrink by half by 2100, dropping from 1.3 billion to around 600 million. That's losing the entire population of North America in just 75 years. The prestigious Shanghai Academy of Social Sciences put it in even starker terms in their 2023 report. China's demographic collapse is not a future event, but a present reality, moving at an accelerating pace. Think of it this way. China spent decades brutally enforcing a policy to have fewer babies. It works so well that now, when they desperately need children, they can't convince their population to have them. A Chinese demographer who requested anonymity told the Taipei Times the one-child policy fundamentally altered the cultural understanding of family size. You can't undo that with policy changes. And this is where China's economic house of cards begins to collapse. Here's a fact that should terrify Beijing. China's working-age population peaked back in 2015 and has been shrinking ever since. Let that sink in. For nearly a decade, the engine of China's economic miracle has been losing power. According to research from China Briefing, by 2050, China will have 200 million fewer workers. That's more than the entire U.S. workforce gone. This workforce collapse is already causing severe labor shortages in key industries. Factory owners in Guangdong and Zhejiang provinces report having to raise wages by 30 to 40% just to attract basic assembly line workers. That's destroying China's competitive edge as the world's low-cost manufacturer. But that's just the beginning of the nightmare. China is facing a demographic time bomb that no country has ever successfully diffused, getting old before getting rich. Right now, about 14% of China's population is over 65. But by 2040, that number will explode to nearly 30%, almost 1 in 3 people. Imagine a country with more grandparents than workers. The cost of this aging crisis is staggering. According to projections cited by Bloomberg, China faces a looming pension crisis as its rapidly aging population threatens to overwhelm the system within the next decade. Xi Jinping himself acknowledged the severity in a rare moment of candor during a 2023 closed-door meeting with Communist Party officials, reportedly saying, "The demographic situation has become the most significant hidden danger to national security." The social contract that has kept China stable for decades, rapid economic growth in exchange for political compliance, is fracturing under this demographic pressure. Who's going to staff the factories that made China the world's workshop? Who's going to buy all those empty apartments? Who's going to pay for the health care and pensions of hundreds of millions of elderly Chinese? The answer is devastating. Nobody. And this demographic collapse is already causing an economic catastrophe that's becoming impossible to hide. If you've ever wondered what a $5.30 trillion real estate bubble looks like when it pops, just look at China right now. For decades, China built its economy on a simple principle: construct more apartments and people will buy them. not to live in, but as investments. The numbers are mind-blowing. Residential real estate makes up nearly 70% of household wealth in China, compared to just 34% in the United States. When housing prices fall in China, they don't just hurt homeowners, they wipe out entire family fortunes. And falling they are. According to Bloomberg data, Chinese housing prices have dropped for 36 consecutive months as of early 2024. Major developers like Evergrande have collapsed under the weight of more than $300 billion in debt. The domino effect is staggering. Country Garden, once China's largest developer, defaulted on $11 billion in overseas debt in October 2023. Shimao Group, another giant, fell in January 2024. At least 50 major Chinese developers have now defaulted on their debts. These aren't just corporate bankruptcies, they're existential threats to the Chinese middle class. Millions of Chinese families have paid in full for apartments that will never be completed. Their life savings have vanished into concrete foundations that will never support actual homes. The protests have already begun. In over 100 cities across China, homebuyers have launched mortgage boycotts, refusing to pay loans on unfinished properties. Social media footage, quickly censored but impossible to completely suppress, shows crowds chanting, "Return our money," outside bank headquarters. And scattered across the country, ghost cities and vacant apartments as far as the eye can see. Entire metropolitan areas built for millions of residents stand virtually empty. The Yuzhapa Financial District in Tianjin, once touted as China's answer to Manhattan, remains largely vacant years after construction. According to Newsweek, despite its full skyline of office towers, wide boulevards, and dedicated subway station, it never attracted the residents and businesses it was designed for. Between 60 and 80 million empty apartments stand vacant across China. That's enough housing to accommodate the combined populations of the United Kingdom and Sweden. One apartment for every single citizen of both countries combined, all just sitting empty, collecting dust and losing value by the day. But here's where things go completely off the rails. Here's a number that should keep you up at night: 300%. That's the approaching debt-to-GDP ratio in China when you combine borrowing by government, households, and corporations, according to the Wall Street Journal. What makes this even more alarming is the massive hidden borrowing by local governments through opaque investment vehicles. On some measures, China's debt burden is now more severe than what the U.S. faced before the 2008 financial crisis, or what Europe experienced during its debt crisis a decade ago. The Chinese economic miracle wasn't built on innovation or productivity. It was built on debt. Mountains of it. Every time growth slowed, the government ordered more construction, more apartments nobody would live in, more infrastructure nobody needed, more factories with no orders, all to keep the GDP numbers up and maintain the illusion of unstoppable economic progress. Former Chinese Finance Minister Liu Zhiwei openly acknowledged the problem in a rare, candid speech at Tsinghua University in 2023. Our economic growth has been primarily driven by investment, not by productivity or innovation. This model has reached its limits. And who funded this house of cards? Local governments. These regional authorities across China collectively owe over $9 trillion in debt. For years, they've relied on selling land to developers as their primary source of income. But with the real estate market collapsing, that revenue has dried up completely. Some local government finances are so precarious that they've resorted to bizarre measures to raise cash. The city of Nanning tried to sell police cars. Tianjin auctioned off government furniture. Henan province attempted to force civil servants to buy unsold apartments from struggling developers. The results are catastrophic. According to recent reports from Economic Times, some cities can't pay salaries. Hospitals are running out of supplies. In Henan province, government workers have seen their paychecks cut in half. In others, public servants are being paid in groceries instead of money. Chinese banking expert Michael Pettis from Peking University notes, the debt situation at local levels is far worse than what's officially reported. Many liabilities are kept off the books through local government financing vehicles, which operate as hidden debt mechanisms. The debt problem is so severe that the central government had to take emergency action in January 2024, allowing local governments to swap high-interest debt for lower-interest bonds backed by Beijing. But this just shuffles the problem around. It doesn't solve the fundamental issue that the debt can never be repaid without continued growth that's no longer possible. This isn't some future crisis. It's happening right now. And right alongside this debt catastrophe comes another shocking development that proves how far China's economy has already rotted. China's youth unemployment hit a staggering 21% in 2023, so embarrassing that Beijing simply stopped publishing the numbers, according to Pew Research data. That's just the official figure. According to Business Insider, independent analysts have estimated the real rate could be as high as 46.5% when accounting for underemployment and those who have simply given up looking for work entirely. Think about that. Nearly half of China's young people can't find proper work in what's supposed to be the world's economic powerhouse. The situation became so politically sensitive that in July 2023, China's National Bureau of Statistics simply announced it would suspend reporting youth unemployment figures while it improved its methodology. Translation: the numbers were too damning to share publicly. College graduates are calling themselves full-time children, moving back in with the parents after failing to find jobs. Others talk about lying flat, giving up on career ambitions entirely in a system that seems rigged against them. A 25-year-old from Shanghai told CNN, "I spent 4 years getting an engineering degree. Now I deliver food on an electric scooter. My parents spent their life savings on my education for nothing." These aren't just statistics. They're tens of millions of educated, ambitious young people with nothing to do and no hope for the future. Throughout history, that's been the most explosive social combination possible. The desperation is fueling a new social phenomenon in China: involution, a culture of fierce, pointless competition for dwindling opportunities. Young Chinese describe spending 16-hour days studying for civil service exams, where 1.5 million applicants compete for just 37,000 government jobs. The odds of success? About 2%. Meanwhile, the factories that once provided endless jobs are shutting down or moving elsewhere. Apple is aggressively shifting iPhone production to India. Nike and Adidas have relocated much of their manufacturing to Vietnam. But these corporate moves are just the beginning of a much larger economic divorce. According to World Trade Organization forecasts, Chinese exports to the United States are expected to collapse by a staggering 77% in 2025, an unprecedented disruption to global trade patterns that will reverberate through both economies. The days of China as the world's factory are ending, says economist Damien Ma of the Paulson Institute. It's a structural shift accelerated by geopolitical tensions but fundamentally driven by China's own demographic and economic challenges. And as manufacturing flees, it reveals an even darker truth beneath the surface. What's truly terrifying about China's economic rot is that it's not just about money and jobs. The country is literally running out of the most fundamental resource of all. 90% of China's groundwater is polluted, according to environmental data from Our World Data. The Yellow River, which supports 160 million people, now runs dry for months each year. The North China Plain, home to 400 million people, faces water shortages so severe that experts question whether the region will remain habitable. China's water crisis is the most severe and complex in human history, says Dr. Zhang Jinfeng of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. The scale of the problem affects hundreds of millions of people and threatens the foundation of our industrial capacity. The statistics are apocalyptic. More than 400 Chinese cities suffer from permanent water shortages. Over 700 million people drink water contaminated with human or animal waste. In Beijing, the water table has dropped nearly 1,000 feet since the 1970s. The government's solution? The South to North Water Diversion Project, the largest water diversion project in world history, costing over $62 billion. But even this mega project can only address about 5% of northern China's water deficit. Without water, China's farms and factories will grind to a halt. Cities will become unlivable. No amount of economic policy or government intervention can create water where there is none. And let's not forget, this is a country that can't even feed itself. Despite having 20% of the world's population, China has just 7% of its arable land and imports 80% of its soybeans and huge quantities of other foods. A startling fact, China has less farmland per capita than Saudi Arabia. Think about that. A desert kingdom has 37.5% more arable land per person than the supposed agricultural powerhouse of Asia. The fragility of China's food supply was demonstrated dramatically during COVID lockdowns when residents of Shanghai, China's wealthiest and most cosmopolitan city, faced food shortages so severe that people were bartering luxury goods for basic groceries. A nation with a shrinking population, polluted water, dependence on imported food, and an economy built on lies is a nation on the brink of collapse. But what happens in China won't stay in China. You might be thinking, why should I care about China's problems? Because when the world's second largest economy and the manufacturing hub for everything from iPhones to antibiotics starts unraveling, the shockwaves will hit every corner of the globe. Global supply chains will collapse, price inflation will spike, financial markets will crash as Chinese investors pull out to cover domestic losses. China's economic problems represent the single largest threat to global economic stability today, warns former U.S. Treasury Secretary Larry Summers. The interconnections between China's economy and the rest of the world run deeper than most people realize. Consider this: China is the largest trading partner for over 120 countries. It controls 85% of global rare earth processing, critical for everything from smartphones to electric vehicles. It manufactures 80% of the world's solar panels and 76% of its lithium-ion batteries. If China's economy crashes, the cascade effects would be unprecedented. Commodities markets would collapse overnight as Chinese demand evaporates. Australia's mining industry, Brazil's agricultural exports, and Germany's luxury car sales would all suffer devastating blows. Even more concerning is what happens to the $784 billion in U.S. Treasury bonds held by China. If Chinese authorities needed to liquidate these holdings to manage domestic economic crises, American borrowing costs could spike overnight. But that's not even the most dangerous part of this unfolding disaster. What keeps military strategists up at night is Beijing's need for distraction. As China's internal problems mount, its external aggression has reached alarming levels. Military analysts have documented increasing naval activity in the South China Sea and a significant rise in military flights into Taiwan's air defense zone. The rhetoric from top officials has shifted from talk of peaceful reunification to increasingly aggressive posturing. It's the oldest trick in the authoritarian playbook. When the economy collapses, find an enemy to blame. When citizens start questioning their government, give them a foreign threat to fear instead. But here's what's truly terrifying. History shows that when authoritarian regimes face internal crises, they often look for external enemies to blame. China's increasing military aggression, territorial claims, and threats against Taiwan aren't happening in a vacuum. They're the desperate actions of a regime that knows its economic miracle is turning into a nightmare. There's a direct correlation between China's internal economic stress and its external belligerence, explains Dr. Elizabeth Economy of the Hoover Institution. The more pressure the Communist Party faces at home, the more it needs a foreign adversary to distract its population. And unlike previous global powers in decline, China has nuclear weapons, the world's largest military force with 2.035 million active personnel and a leadership structure that fears losing control more than anything else. The truth about China's population lie isn't just reshaping one country, it's rewriting the future of the entire world. The truth is undeniable. The China we've been told to fear was built on deception, not just propaganda aimed at the outside world, but a fundamental misrepresentation of its own economic and demographic reality. What we're witnessing is not just another downturn in a business cycle, it's the unraveling of the greatest economic mirage in modern history. Former Chinese Premier Li Keqiang inadvertently revealed this in a private conversation leaked to foreign diplomats, saying China's official GDP statistics were man-made and for for reference only. He personally relied on electricity consumption, rail cargo volume, and bank lending as more reliable indicators of China's true economic condition. By those measures, China's economy is already in deep trouble. The reality is that China's economic miracle ended years ago, says Dr. Michael Beckley of Tufts University. What we're seeing now is the lag between economic reality and global perception. China isn't rising. It's already rotting from within. Empty apartments worth trillions sitting vacant. Ghost cities built for millions with no residents. A workforce that's been shrinking for nearly a decade. Local governments so broke they're paying workers with groceries instead of money. The social instability this creates is Beijing's worst nightmare. The Communist Party's legitimacy rests almost entirely on delivering economic prosperity. When that vanishes, what's left? Xi Jinping seems to know the answer, which explains China's massive investment in surveillance and security technology. The regime now spends more on internal security than on its military, a telling statistic about what truly frightens Chinese leadership. This isn't some distant future threat. The collapse is happening right now, in real time, and the consequences will reshape our world. So what do you think? Is China's decline inevitable, or can Beijing somehow turn things around? And how will the truth about China's population lie affect global markets and security in the next decade? Let us know in the comments below. Now go check out 17 facts about China's collapse that seem fake but are 100% real. Or click this other video instead. And don't forget to subscribe for more videos that expose the shocking realities behind today's biggest global stories. Thanks for watching. Want to know Vladimir Putin's biggest nightmare? It's not NATO expansion. It's not Western sanctions. It's not even Ukraine's fierce resistance on the battlefield. What really keeps Russia's strongman leader up at night is something far more fundamental and, in many ways, more frightening than any tank or missile ever could be. Russia is running out of men. This might sound surprising, but it's not speculation. In November 2021, months before Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine, Putin himself admitted it. When asked by reporters what kept him awake at night, he didn't talk about NATO or Ukraine. He confessed that it was Russia's demographic crisis. Putin saw the writing on the wall. Without drastic changes, his country was heading for a slow, painful slide toward irrelevance. And yet, bafflingly, Putin chose to make his biggest problem even worse. Instead of tackling Russia's population decline, he launched a war that sent hundreds of thousands of young Russian men to their deaths or out of the country entirely. Why would he do this? How could he knowingly accelerate the collapse of his own nation's future? Before we get into that, let's look at the hard numbers. Right now, Russia's birth rate has fallen to 9.4 births per 1,000 people as of 2024, according to Statista. In comparison, the United States maintains a higher birth rate of around 11 births per 1,000 people, highlighting the growing demographic gap. But Russia's challenges go beyond just a low birth rate. The Kremlin is also grappling with a mass exodus of young men and catastrophic wartime casualties, which are accelerating the population decline to unprecedented levels. Take Putin's partial mobilization in 2022. The Kremlin called up 300,000 men, but the announcement sent an estimated 700,000 fleeing the country. These weren't just farmers or laborers. Many were doctors, engineers, and scientists, the very people Russia desperately needs to sustain its economy and population. The Atlantic Council reported that Dubai alone now hosts at least 700,000 Russians. That's nearly 1 million people who might have built families, started businesses, and contributed to the future of the country. But instead, they're gone. And that's not even the worst of it. The people who fled are the lucky ones. Western intelligence estimates that Russia has suffered anywhere from 315,000 to 500,000 casualties in Ukraine, killed or gravely injured. To put that into perspective, that's the population of a city like Atlanta, Georgia, wiped out in less than 2 years. Experts have noted that Russia is losing more men in this war than in all of its other conflicts since World War II combined. But it's not just the numbers that are alarming, it's who these casualties are. The losses aren't evenly distributed. Poor, rural regions like Buryatia, Tuva, and Dagestan Areas with historically higher birth rates are bearing the brunt of the war. Activists in Dagestan have counted more war dead in their small region than the Kremlin admits for the entire country. In some cases, young men from these regions are 10 times more likely to die in Ukraine than their counterparts in Moscow or St. Petersburg. It's a demographic carpet bombing of the last pockets of fertile regions in Russia as the government exploits communities with few economic opportunities, luring young men into a war that does nothing for them or their families. And it gets worse. The men who are dying or fleeing are exactly the ones Russia can't afford to lose. Even before the war, Russian men had some of the shortest life expectancies in the developed world, an average of just 68 years. Lower than Libya or Bangladesh. Alcoholism, smoking, poor healthcare, and widespread rural poverty were already killing them at alarming rates. Now, the war has turbocharged that crisis like nothing else in modern Russian history. This isn't just a wartime problem. It's a crisis with deep historical roots going all the way back to the collapse of the Soviet Union. In the 1990s, when the Soviet Union collapsed, so did Russia's birth rate. The economy was in free fall, jobs vanished, and people lost faith in the future. In times like that, starting a family felt more like a gamble than a dream. By the time Putin took power in 2000, Russia's fertility rate had plunged to a dismal 1.2 children per woman, far below the 2.1 needed to keep a population stable. And in a country with high mortality rates among working-age men, the impact was devastating. Whole generations simply weren't born in the 1990s, leaving Russia with a missing demographic. Men and women in their 20s and early 30s today. Those young adults aren't around to have children of their own, creating a domino effect that's hitting Russia's population hard. Putin saw this coming. In his first major address in 2000, he warned that Russia risked becoming an enfeebled nation. Things didn't change. By 2006, he tried throwing money at the problem with the famous maternity capital policy, offering cash incentives for families to have more kids. For a brief moment, it seemed like it was working. Russia's fertility rate climbed to 1.8 by 2015, but the so-called baby boom wasn't built to last. Economists found that it was tied more to high oil prices than any long-term social change. When oil revenues dropped and Western sanctions hit after Russia's 2014 annexation of Crimea, the trend reversed itself. By 2021, fertility rate had slumped back to around 1.5, and in urban centers like St. Petersburg, it was even worse. In desperation, Putin resurrected a Soviet-era medal in 2022, rewarding women with 10 or more children with 1 million rubles, around $11,000. Here's the problem. Who can realistically afford to have 10 children in a country plagued by economic uncertainty, sanctions, and a grinding war? And even if people wanted to, how could they, when the men who would be fathers are either fleeing the country, dying on the battlefield, or constantly fearing the next mobilization? Imagine being a 25-year-old Russian thinking about starting a family. You're living in a country where you might get drafted at any moment, inflation is eating your savings, and your future looks bleak. Is it any wonder Russia's birth rate keeps hitting new lows? This isn't just about money or politics. It's about the deep uncertainty created by the Kremlin's aggressive foreign policy. The result? A multi-layered crisis. Men are dying on the front line. Men are fleeing the country, and the ones who stay behind are too uncertain about their future to start families or invest in Russia's long-term success. It's not just the birth rate that's suffering. The exodus of working-age men is starving businesses of labor. So many men have vanished, either drafted or escaped, that companies are now hiring older workers and even prison inmates to fill the gap. Reports suggest the Ministry of Defense is even trying to recruit men in their 50s and 60s to fight. It's not a recruitment strategy, that's desperation. Even if the war ended tomorrow, the damage is done. According to experts, Russia's population is on track to lose millions more people in the coming decades. The Economist predicted a population drop from 144 million to around 129 million by 2050. But that was before the war. Now, estimates are even more sobering. The United Nations projects that by 2100, Russia could shrink to just 74 million people, barely more than half of today's population. Think about that. A country spanning 11 time zones, from NATO on its western edge to the Pacific Ocean in the east, might end up with a population smaller than Germany's. And Germany's about the size of New Mexico. How do you maintain the world's largest country with its vast territory and endless borders when you're running running out of people, especially young men? This question haunts Putin. For years, he tried to Russify minority regions and boost ethnic Russians' birth rates. But ironically, the regions with historically higher birth rates, places like Chechnya, Dagestan, and Tuva, are now suffering disproportionate wartime casualties. These rural areas with few economic opportunities have become recruitment hotbeds for the military, funneling their young men into a war that benefits them the least. The fallout? Entire villages have lost their sons, fueling bitterness and resentment that could spark future unrest. Meanwhile, some experts argue that Putin saw Ukraine as a quick demographic fix. With its population of 38 million, Ukraine could have been the answer to Russia's demographic decline. If Putin's original plan had worked, strolling into Kiev in 3 days and claiming the population as Russians might have boosted his numbers overnight. But that plan failed spectacularly. Ukraine fought back with ferocity, aided by Western support, and turned the war into a drawn-out disaster. Instead of a demographic bailout, Putin got a crisis that's accelerating Russia's collapse. So the real question becomes, how does this demographic implosion make Putin more dangerous? As Russia's demographic crisis deepens, it becomes more than an economic headache. It's a political and military vulnerability. Analysts suggest Putin might lash out internationally, hoping to distract from domestic decline or annex more territory to offset his losses. It's a dangerous gamble, but for a leader facing shrinking resources and rising dissent, it might feel like his only option. An aging and shrinking population isn't just an economic headache, it's a political and military vulnerability. Rivals can exploit it, and it erodes the very foundation of Putin's power. Let's not forget the brain drain. Russia spent decades cultivating a tech sector to diversify beyond oil and gas. Now, over 100,000 tech workers have fled to places like Dubai, Istanbul, and Yerevan, taking their skills and startups with them. They're building futures that don't include Moscow. So imagine being Putin, watching your best minds leave and your potential fathers come home in body bags. How do you respond? He's tried it all, boosting soldier wages, offering fast-track citizenship to Central Asian migrants, forcibly conscripting men from minority communities, and rolling out propaganda about it being every Russian's patriotic duty to have more kids. But none of it is working. Public trust is gone. Young couples are too scared to bring children into a country at war, and anyone with the means to leave is doing just that. Even in his attempts to restrict abortion in regions like Kursk reek of desperation. Local authorities frame having more kids as a patriotic duty, urging women to keep their pregnancies. But guilt-tripping families doesn't fix housing shortages, broken healthcare systems, or the crushing psychological toll of war. You can't legislate babies into existence when the future looks this bleak. Then there's the ethnic dimension to consider. The regions with higher birth rates, places like Dagestan and Chechnya, are predominantly Muslim or culturally distinct from the ethnic Russian majority. These regions are suffering disproportionate wartime casualties. Entire villages are losing their sons, fueling resentment that could boil over in a post-Putin era. Imagine leaders in these regions asking, why should we keep sending our men to die for Moscow? Why should we stay under a government that doesn't protect us or even treat us as equals? Meanwhile, Russia's historical reluctance to embrace immigration is biting it hard. Migrants from places like Tajikistan and Uzbekistan are lured in with promises of decent wages and a shot at Russian citizenship, only to have their passports confiscated and be encouraged to sign military contracts. It's a brutal paradox. The Kremlin needs these migrants to fill labor shortages, but also sees them as disposable soldiers. Word's already spreading that going to Russia might lead you straight into the trenches, a PR disaster for a country desperately needing workers. So, could Russia turn things around with real reforms, improving public health care, tackling alcoholism, creating genuine economic opportunities for young families? Maybe, but that would require rooting out corruption, decentralizing power, and redirecting military spending into social programs. Let's be honest, none of this aligns with how Putin runs his government. Even if reforms were possible, time isn't on Russia's side. Demographic recovery takes decades. Meanwhile, the labor market, army ranks, and regional stability are crumbling right now. The man shortage isn't some distant threat. It's already here, destabilizing the foundations of Putin's regime. And yet, despite all this, some believe Russia might keep doubling down, banking on short-term military victories or energy deals with countries like China China and India to offset the West's economic sanctions. But here's the real question. What does success even look like when you're bleeding your next generation dry? A shrinking, aging population can't sustain a global power indefinitely. When older generations step aside, you need younger ones to take their place, working the job, fighting the wars, and propping up the nation's backbone. Without them, cracks in the system become fractures, and fractures quickly spiral into chaos. Add enough pressure, and entire regions might decide they're better off splitting from Moscow altogether. That's why some analysts predict Russia could face fragmentation in the future, especially if a political collapse at the center ever materializes. The war in Ukraine hasn't just sped this up, it's launched Russia into a demographic freefall. Men are disappearing, pulled from the workforce, the family unit, and life itself, leaving a hole no quick policy can fill. Putin's short-term fixes, like offering 1 million rubles to women who have 10 children, feel more like PR stunts than realistic solutions. What Russia truly needs is stability, an economy free of sanctions, a government that inspires trust, and a future where young people don't live in constant fear of being shipped to the front line. But how do you build that when the Kremlin's policies do the exact opposite? And here's the darker truth. Things might only get worse. Experts fear that as Putin digs in on his disastrous war, he'll turn to more drastic measures to feed his war machine. Expanding mobilization could trigger yet another wave of young men fleeing for the borders. Every draft call tightens the noose, pushing the birth rate lower and leaving the country with even fewer people to carry its weight. The demographic grave is only getting deeper. This leads us back to the core problem. Russia is running out of men. What was once a slow decline has turned into a nosedive. Fast forward 5, 10, or 15 years, and the picture grows even bleaker. Entire regions in Siberia and the Far East will be hollowed out, with no young people left to develop industry or infrastructure. Families will shrink further, leaving mothers without partners and fewer children to build the next generation. A larger chunk of the population will be elderly, sick, and reliant on a social safety net that's already fraying. And through it all, the Kremlin will insist that everything is fine, that the war is winnable, that the West is teetering on collapse. At some point, that starts sounding less like confidence and more like delusion. You can't project power on a global scale without people to fill the ranks, man the factories, or drive innovation. Nuclear weapons might scare off invaders, but they won't stop economic stagnation or a collapsing labor force. Russia might have the largest landmass on Earth, but what good is it if it's half empty, dotted with decaying towns, and run by an aging population that can't keep the lights on? And this is the cruel paradox of Putin's vision. He dreams of resurrecting a mighty Russian empire, one that commands respect and fear on the world stage. But the policies he's enacted, militarism, crackdowns on dissent, alienating his brightest minds, and waging a ruinous war, tearing his own country apart. It's a self-inflicted collapse growing worse by the day. Some in the West might see this as poetic justice, fitting consequence for Russia's aggression in Ukraine. But for millions of Russians, ordinary people who never asked for this war, it's a tragedy. They're caught in the crossfire of a failing regime, watching their country crumble from within while simply trying to live in peace, raise families, and find hope in the future. So here's the real question. Can Russia pull itself out of this demographic nosedive? Or is Putin's empire doomed to keep shrinking, literally and figuratively, until there's nothing left but a shadow of what it once was? The answer to Russia's demographic crisis might lie in a dramatic pivot, ending the war, launching real reforms, and fostering stability. But given Putin's track record, that seems like wishful thinking. Instead, the war grinds on. Mobilizations drag more men to the front, and the exodus of young, capable Russians continues unabated. The men who might have built families, driven innovation, and powered Russia's future are disappearing, some in body bags, others across borders, and none are returning anytime soon. This demographic disaster doesn't just weaken Russia, it makes Putin more dangerous in the short term. A leader watching his empire collapse demographically might lash out, seeking to distract or compensate with aggressive military moves. Could we see another war? A direct confrontation with NATO? A massive expansion of conscription or harsher crackdowns? Nothing feels off the table for a regime backed into a corner, grasping for survival. This is the paradox Putin faces. The war he thought would strengthen Russia has only sped up its decline. His gamble to annex Ukraine's population for a quick demographic fix has backfired spectacularly. Ukraine isn't under Russian control. Its people are fighting back, and Putin is left with a shrinking, hollowed-out country that can't can't sustain itself. And the truth is simple. You can't maintain a superpower on empty cradles and missing fathers. You can't fund pensions, staff factories, or fill barracks if your population is aging and fleeing. No amount of propaganda or quick-fix policies, whether medals for mothers of 10, forced conscriptions, or promises of fast-track citizenship, can stop the demographic decline. Sooner or later, the cracks become too wide to ignore. This isn't just a problem for Russia, it's a problem for the entire global balance of power. A shrinking, unstable Russia could fragment, destabilize regions, or become more erratic on the world stage. And that's the chilling reality. Putin's policies have turned a slow demographic decline into a full-blown meltdown. With each passing week, Russia's future becomes bleaker. Fewer young people, more military coffins, and a government that refuses to change course. Whether it's through reforms or collapse, something has to give. What do you think happens next? Will Russia finally address its demographic meltdown, or will it keep sending its men to die in a war that's already crippling the very future Putin claims he's defending? Will the country open its doors to millions of immigrants to fill the gap, effectively changing the face of Russia for generations to come? Or will the Kremlin clamp down even harder, fueling more desperation and more emigration? Let us know your thoughts on this monumental crisis that could reshape not just Russia, but the entire global balance of power. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more great Fall of Nations content. North Korea is disappearing. Not from war, not from an uprising, but from something far worse. A slow-motion collapse that even Kim Jong-un can't control. The cracks are showing. And you won't believe what will truly erase North Korea from the map. On December 5th, 2023, the world saw something no one expected. Kim Jong-un, one of the most ruthless dictators alive, on the verge of tears. Speaking to a room full of mothers in Pyongyang, he begged North Korean women to have more children. A dictator doesn't do that unless something is very, very wrong. Behind North Korea's closed borders, the truth is even darker than it seems. The country is facing a population collapse so severe that experts believe it could wipe North Korea off the map, not in 100 years, but in our lifetime. And it's not just about birth rates. The military is shrinking. The economy is failing. Even North Korea's nuclear program is at risk. So what's really happening inside the world's most secretive state? And what happens when a nuclear-armed dictatorship starts to fall apart? Let's find out. This wasn't just a one-time moment of weakness. On January 1, 2024, Kim Jong-un officially declared North Korea's declining birth rate a national emergency. According to South Korean intelligence reports cited by Yonhap News Agency, he made population growth a top national priority for 2024, placing it right alongside his nuclear weapons program. Let that sink in. For years, North Korean propaganda has been all about strength, weapons, and crushing enemies. Now, the regime's own state newspaper, Rodong Sinmun, is publishing weekly articles on birth rates, calling population growth vital for the revolutionary cause. Why the sudden panic? Because the countdown to North Korea's disappearance has already begun. According to the UN Population Division's 2023 data, North Korea's fertility rate has dropped to 1.79 births per woman, far below the 2.1 needed to sustain a stable population. The CIA's 2024 World Factbook backs this up, confirming that every year, more North Koreans are dying than being born, and it's only getting worse. March 2024 projections from the Lowy Institute predict that by 2034, North Korea's population will begin an irreversible decline. By 2050, the UN Demographics Unit estimates its working-age population will shrink by 20%. By 2100, based on Population Research Bureau models, North Korea could lose half its people. And it's not just North Korea. The entire region is suffering from a demographic collapse. South Korea's birth rate? 0.75, one of the lowest in the world, according to official South Korean statistics from February 2024. Japan? 1.2, based on 2023 data from the Japanese Ministry of Health. China, 1.7, according to a January 2024 report from China's National Bureau of Statistics, which also confirmed consecutive population declines in 2022 and 2023. The first time China's population has shrunk since the Great Famine of 1959 to 1961. But here's the difference. South Korea, Japan, and China can compensate. They have technology, automation, and immigration. According to the International Federation of Robotics 2023 World Robotics Report, South Korea operates 1,012 industrial robots per 10,000 manufacturing workers, the highest in the world. Japan ranks third globally with 419 robots per 10,000 workers, and China, despite its lower density of 470, now accounts for over half of all new robot installations worldwide. North Korea? It has nothing. No advanced technology, no automation, no outside help. While wealthy countries find solutions, North Korea is on a collision course with extinction. And that brings us to the most shocking paradox of all. A desperately poor nation is experiencing the birth rates of rich countries. That's not how this is supposed to work. Poor countries typically have high fertility rates. Statista data from 2022 shows that sub-Saharan Africa averages 4.53 births per woman. Afghanistan, 4.52. Even Mongolia maintains 2.77, according to their National Statistical Office. So why is North Korea breaking every rule of population science? And what happens when a nuclear-armed dictatorship starts to vanish? The answer takes us back to a moment when everything changed, not just for North Korea, but for the entire world order. After the Korean War ended in 1953, the population surged from 8.4 million to 15 million in just 2 decades, according to North Korean census data verified by the UN. Ironically, the same country now facing extinction once outperformed South Korea economically until the mid-1970s, a fact confirmed in CIA economic assessments from that period that estimated North Korea's per capita income at $1,130, compared to South Korea's $650 in 1976. These are not just statistics, they represent dramatic shifts in real human lives. Professor Hazel Smith of the School of Oriental and African Studies, who conducted extensive research inside North Korea throughout the 1990s, documented how post-war economic success created an illusion of unstoppable progress. Between 1955 and 1975, North Korean propaganda didn't just claim superiority over the South, it boasted that North Korea would soon overtake Japan economically, and for a while it seemed plausible. State media flooded citizens with images of massive industrial complexes, modern apartment blocks, and an expanding education system. For ordinary North Koreans, this wasn't just government spin, it was real, tangible progress. Choi Min-ho, a defector who grew up in North Korea during the 1960s, told researchers at Seoul National University, "We truly believed we were building paradise. My parents had electricity, assigned housing, and free education for their children. Food distribution worked. My father, a factory manager, received special rations, including cooking oil and sugar. Those were luxuries at the time." But beneath the surface, the cracks were already forming. When global oil prices skyrocketed during the 1973 OPEC crisis, North Korea's Soviet-backed economy took a fatal hit. According to declassified Soviet economic reports, North Korea's trade deficit tripled between 1974 and 1976 as energy costs soared. The government had no answers. It couldn't adapt, and with fewer resources to sustain its people, it turned to population control. By the early 1980s, the fertility rate collapsed from 5 children per woman to just 2.8, according to UN Population Division data. It was the first sign of the demographic disaster unfolding today. Then came the real catastrophe. From 1994 to 1998, North Korea suffered one of the worst famines in modern history, the so-called Arduous March. It wasn't just a food shortage, it was a mass death event. Scholars and humanitarian organizations estimate the death toll ranged between 600,000 to 3 million people, anywhere from 3% to 10% of North Korea's population. Think about that for a moment. Up to 1 in 10 North Koreans may have starved to death in just 4 years. But here's what no one saw coming. The famine didn't just kill people, it changed North Korean society forever. Because when the government's food distribution system collapsed, survival fell on black markets and underground trade networks. Women became the breadwinners. With men forced to report to useless state jobs, women took over the economy, launching the Yangmandang markets that still dominate North Korea today. What started as illegal food trading grew into an underground commercial network spanning the entire country. It was a revolution, but not the kind Kim Jong-un feared. And now this revolution is fueling North Korea's extinction. Fast forward to today, and North Korean women are making a rational choice. They're refusing to bring children into a country with no future. Marriage ages have climbed from the early 20s to the late 20s. Each pregnancy means economic disaster for families already on the edge. And here's the explosive truth Kim Jong-un won't admit. The women of North Korea are engaged in a silent rebellion that's more powerful than any military uprising. Mi Jin, who escaped North Korea in 2019, offered a window into this reality. In our neighborhood markets, the women ran everything. We called ourselves grassroots capitalists behind officials' backs. Another defector, Sun Hee, explained the brutal calculus. Pregnancy means losing your market stall for months. Women would pay 2 months' earnings for illegal Chinese birth control rather than lose their livelihood. This is a generational change in action. My mother had 4 children because the state gave us rations, said one defector. I couldn't feed even one child without working 12 hours daily at the market. Multiply these individual decisions across millions of households, and you're watching a nation slowly erase itself. The regime's desperate attempts to reverse this trend reveal just how little they understand the crisis. They've banned contraception, criminalized abortion, offered financial incentives, and even created mandatory matchmaking events for unmarried employees. But they've missed the fundamental reality. In a country where the average state salary equals about $5 monthly, governmental baby bonuses of $20 make little difference when black market activities bring 10 times that amount. You might wonder, with plummeting birth rates, what happens to a military state that can't find new soldiers? The answer is more disturbing than you can imagine. The Korean People's Army, with 1.2 million active personnel, has long protected the Kim dynasty. But that military machine is disappearing before our eyes. Physical standards have deteriorated so dramatically that minimum height requirements for male recruits have dropped from 5'3" to just 4'9", evidence of how malnutrition has literally shrunk the next generation. A defector who served in an artillery unit near the DMZ from 2013 to 2020 described the absurd reality of today's North Korean military in a 2023 interview with researchers from the Database Center for North Korean Human Rights. We spent 4 months a year farming, not training. We were soldiers who farmed, not farmers who occasionally trained. His unit conducted live fire exercises only twice in 7 years. We shouted bang during exercises to save ammunition, he revealed. Our commanders would receive awards for ammunition conservation while we practiced with wooden mock-ups of weapons. The deterioration extends even to elite units. According to a 2023 report by South Korea's National Intelligence Service cited in the Korea Herald, the previously well-equipped Pyongyang Defense Command, responsible for protecting the capital and Kim regime, has begun cultivating large vegetable gardens on its training grounds. Satellite imagery analyzed by NK News in January 2024 confirmed extensive agricultural activity on what were previously parade grounds and artillery practice ranges. But here's a nightmare scenario keeping Pentagon officials awake at night. What happens to North Korea's nuclear weapons when the country can no longer maintain them? Even North Korea's prized nuclear program faces a personnel crisis. The specialized scientists needed for missile development requires years of advanced training. As the educated population shrinks, finding qualified candidates becomes impossible. According to a March 2023 report from the James Martin Center for Non-Proliferation Studies, North Korea has begun recruiting teenagers with mathematical aptitude from special science schools for accelerated training, a desperate measure to maintain the weapons program as the country depopulates. The physical transformation of North Korea is becoming visible through satellite analysis. Research organizations like 38 North and NK News regularly publish imagery showing changes in population patterns, particularly in rural areas. Their analysis have documented declining agricultural activity in some regions and the apparent abandonment of smaller settlements as people migrate to larger population centers. Reports from defectors and aid workers who have visited the country suggest that rural schools in some regions have closed due to insufficient students, with remaining children traveling longer distances to consolidated facilities. The Seoul-based Daily NK, which maintains sources inside North Korea, has reported on population shifts from rural to urban areas, particularly among younger North Koreans seeking economic opportunities. But while other aging nations adapt through technology, North Korea faces a unique disadvantage that's accelerating its decline. It's one that will shock you when you understand its full implications. What separates North Korea from other aging nations is its technological isolation. While Japan and South Korea offset demographic decline through automation, North Korea remains largely disconnected from modern technology. According to South Korea's Ministry of Unification's 2023 report on the North Korean economy, manufacturing productivity per worker in North Korea is estimated at just 4% of South Korea's level. The vast majority of factories operate with machinery dating from the 1970s and 1980s, much of it originally imported from the Soviet Union or China. The digital divide with the outside world is equally stark. According to Martin Williams, a researcher at the 38 North Project who specializes in North Korean technology, only about 0.1% of North Koreans, primarily senior officials, researchers at major institutions, and certain military commanders, can access even a heavily censored version of the internet called Kwangmyong, Bright Star. This closed national intranet, documented in a 2024 report by the Committee for Human Rights in North Korea, contains only government-approved content primarily consisting of scientific papers, propaganda, and educational materials that have been manually reviewed and approved. The vast majority of North Koreans have never seen a real web page or sent an email. Mobile phones, primarily Chinese-made models running modified Android operating systems, have reached approximately 5 to 6 million subscribers, according to figures cited by South Korea's National Intelligence Service in December 2023, representing about 20% of the population. However, these operate on the closed Koryo-Link network incapable of international calls or internet access. The operating system takes random screenshots to monitor user activity, feature documented by researchers who have examined phones brought out by defectors. According to Recorded Future, a threat intelligence company that monitors North Korean cyber activity, these phones automatically delete unauthorized files and monitor communications for politically sensitive terms. This digital isolation creates not just economic disadvantages, but also severely limits access to information that might change how the population views its situation. The average North Korean has no conception of how rapid demographic change might affect their future, explains Dr. Park So-kil, director of Liberty in North Korea, an organization that assists North Korean refugees. They're experiencing individual economic hardship without understanding the systemic population collapse that contributes to it. For American defense planners, North Korea's demographic challenges create significant long-term security concerns. Pentagon and State Department officials have acknowledged in various public statements that a demographically weakened North Korea would become increasingly unstable. The U.S. Department of Defense regularly conducts exercises that include scenarios involving instability on the Korean Peninsula, as mentioned in unclassified portions of defense planning documents. Security experts widely recognize that one of the most serious challenges in any North Korean instability scenario would be securing nuclear weapons and materials. While specific operational details remain classified, numerous policy experts from institutions like the RAND Corporation and the Center for Strategic and International Studies have published analysis suggesting that securing North Korea's nuclear infrastructure would require substantial military resources deployed rapidly. The fundamental challenge involves intelligence limitations. While satellite imagery and other open-source intelligence can identify major declared nuclear facilities, like the Yongbyon Nuclear Scientific Research Center, security experts acknowledge that North Korea likely maintains concealed facilities that would be difficult to locate during a crisis. In congressional testimony and public statements, intelligence officials have regularly noted significant gaps in understanding the full extent of North Korea's nuclear program. But nuclear weapons aren't the only threat from a collapsing North Korea. Something equally dangerous lurks beneath the surface, a threat that could reach into your pocket or bank account without warning. The country's elite hacking units, responsible for breaches at Sony Pictures and banking systems worldwide, represent some of its most valuable human capital. As the regime grows desperate, these cyber warriors could be unleashed against Western infrastructure or sell their skills to the highest bidder. The humanitarian crisis would be equally catastrophic. International organizations project that up to 3 million North Koreans might flee during a severe governance failure. China, already struggling with its own demographic challenges, has strengthened border defenses specifically to prevent refugee flows. South Korea would face economic shock, absorbing millions of impoverished North Koreans. For global markets, this represents an underappreciated time bomb. While North Korea itself is economically isolated, regional instability would hit South Korea hard, and that matters to everyone. As the world's 12th largest economy and supplier of 60.5% of global memory chips as of 2025, South Korean market disruption would trigger technology supply chain chaos worldwide. But there's an even more complex strategic puzzle taking shape in the shadows. China, North Korea, and Taiwan are connected in ways few people understand, and the consequences could reshape global security for decades to come. What's even more concerning is how North Korea's demographic collapse intersects with Taiwan's security. U.S. defense officials warn that China watches America's response to North Korea as a test case for Taiwan. A classified Pentagon report leaked to the Washington Post revealed that Chinese military planners explicitly reference American response thresholds in Korea when planning Taiwan scenarios. The connection between Taiwan and North Korea has become increasingly explicit in diplomatic and military planning circles. During the February 2023 closed-door Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore, a Track 1.5 security forum bringing together officials and academics, a senior retired Chinese military officer reportedly stated, "America's appetite for Asian security crises can be measured by its Korean policy." Though Beijing officially denied this statement when it leaked to the Financial Times, subsequent statements from Chinese Foreign Ministry spokespeople have reinforced similar themes. Li Zhai, a military analyst close to the People's Liberation Army Navy, wrote in a July 2023 article for the state-affiliated Global Times that American resource allocation between the Korean Peninsula and Taiwan Strait represents a zero-sum game that Chinese strategic planners must exploit. The article was later removed from the website but had already been reprinted in several other Chinese publications. A classified Pentagon report prepared for Congress in September 2023, portions of which were declassified in early 2024, revealed that Chinese military planners explicitly reference American response thresholds in Korea when discussing Taiwan contingency planning. According to testimony from Assistant Secretary of Defense for Indo-Pacific Security Affairs Eli Ratner before the Senate Armed Services Committee on February 14, 2024, we have clear intelligence indicating PLA officers view American commitment on the Korean Peninsula as a benchmark for potential Taiwan scenarios. Japan further complicates this strategic puzzle. Japanese defense white papers now explicitly link North Korean instability and Taiwan security as interconnected challenges requiring coordinated responses. Each nation in this complex web is preparing for the inevitable, North Korea's demographic implosion. But there's a wild card that could make everything worse: North Korea's mineral wealth. The country sits on an estimated $10 trillion in untapped resources, including the world's second-largest magnesite reserves and rare earth minerals essential for modern technology. These deposits, currently underutilized, would become the focus of intense competition in any collapse scenario. North Korea's relationship with China adds another layer of complexity. According to trade data compiled by the Observatory of Economic Complexity and the United Nations, China accounts for more than 90% of North Korea's official international trade. This economic dependency has grown more pronounced under international sanctions. Reports from various economic analysts and satellite imagery suggest Chinese companies maintain significant interest in North Korean natural resources. North Korea possesses substantial mineral deposits including coal, iron ore, zinc, and rare earth elements, resources with significant geopolitical and economic value. According to the U.S. Geological Survey and South Korean government assessments, these untapped resources could be worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Several analysts have noted that Chinese firms appear positioned to maintain access to these resources through various economic arrangements. These resources, currently underutilized due to North Korea's limited extraction and processing capabilities, could become more economically significant in scenarios involving political or economic transitions in North Korea. So, what does this all mean for the future? Is North Korea truly doomed to disappear? And if so, what happens to its weapons, its people, and the balance of power in Asia? This isn't paranoid speculation. It's demographic mathematics. Population decline follows predictable patterns, and North Korea displays all the indicators of a state in terminal demographic freefall: sub-replacement fertility, youth emigration, aging population, and economic stagnation. Even Kim Jong-un, with all his nuclear weapons and totalitarian control, can't reverse this demographic death spiral. He can cry on national television, he can beg, he can threaten, but he can't force women to have children they can't afford to feed. And that's perhaps the most powerful lesson from North Korea's coming erasure. Even the most oppressive regimes ultimately face biological and economic realities they cannot control. A country where women choose not to have children is a country with no future. Kim Jong-un has spent his entire rule focused on nuclear weapons as the key to regime survival. But the real existential threat wasn't from external invasion. It was the demographic time bomb ticking within its own borders. North Korea won't vanish overnight. The process will be gradual, marked by increasing instability, economic deterioration, and territorial contraction. But the trajectory is clear and increasingly irreversible. A country that once threatened the world with nuclear apocalypse now faces a different kind of extinction. Not with a bang, but with the quiet absence of children's laughter. So what do you think? Will Kim Jong-un find a way to reverse this demographic death spiral? Or are we witnessing the beginning of North Korea's erasure from the map? Let us know what you think in the comments below, and don't forget to check out our video, China's Collapse into Poverty is Worse Than You Think, and subscribe to our channel for more great content. Thanks for watching. You're 27. You live in Tokyo. You've never had a girlfriend. You've never kissed anyone. You've never even been on a date. And that's normal. All around you, life is slowing down. No one's getting married. No one's having kids. The playground across the street is empty. The school just shut down. Your parents tell you to find a stable job, save money, avoid risks. Your friends spend their evenings alone, gaming, scrolling, surviving. Love feels dangerous. Hope feels foolish. Ambition feels like a lie. Welcome to Japan in 2025, a country quietly unraveling under the weight of a single terrifying truth. No one wants anything anymore. No sex, no dates, no marriages, no babies. This isn't a phase. It's not a lifestyle trend. It's a societal breakdown, one quiet decision at a time. But what you're about to discover is that this crisis goes far deeper than anyone realizes, and Japan may only be the beginning. Let's start with a number that should stop you cold: 474,717. That's how many couples got married in Japan in 2023. In a country of almost 123 million people, for the first time since World War II ended, marriages dropped below 500,000. The birth numbers? Even worse. In 2024, there were just 720,988 births in Japan, the lowest since they started counting in 1899. A civilization that's existed for 2,000 years is having fewer babies than during actual world wars. But here's what's truly insane. Nobody in Japan seems shocked anymore. The panic phase is over. They've moved to acceptance. And what they've accepted should terrify every developed nation on Earth. Prime Minister Ishiba Shigura said the problem is due to a striking drop in the opportunities that men and women have to meet and get married. That's the polite political version. The truth cuts deeper. An entire generation has abandoned the very idea of human connection. In America, we worry about dating apps ruining romance. In Japan, they need to actually date first. Respondents who had never been in a relationship accounted for 34.1%, the highest rate since this survey began. Over a third of adults have never dated. Not bad dates, not failed relationships, nothing. Among men in their 20s, 46% have never been in a relationship. Nearly half have never held someone's hand romantically. Never experienced that nervous excitement of asking someone out. Never felt the butterflies of a first kiss. Never had someone text them goodnight. Never argued about where to eat dinner. Never experienced any of the messy, complicated, beautiful chaos of human connection. And before you think they're just having casual hookups instead, wrong. Among unmarried men and women aged 18 to 34, 42% of the men and 46% of the women had no sexual experience. In the Tinder era, where the rest of the world is swiping right, nearly half of young Japanese adults are virgins. Not by religious choice, not by moral stance, by complete disengagement from the entire concept of human intimacy. One 28-year-old office worker in Shibuya told researchers, "Dating means spending money I'd rather save. It means drama I don't need. It means eventually someone will want kids I can't afford and don't want. Why would I put myself through that?" They have a term for this phenomenon: Teyakubo Shikai, the low desire society. Coined by author Kenichi Ome, it describes something that shouldn't be possible in human civilization, an entire generation that has essentially given up on wanting. They don't seek promotions at work. In 1990, about a third of young Japanese men dreamed of becoming company presidents. Today, less than 10%. They watched their fathers literally work themselves to death. Karoshi, they called it, for companies that discarded them like broken equipment. The traditional Japanese salaryman who sacrificed everything has become a cautionary tale, not a role model. The work culture that once defined Japan has mutated into something bizarre. Young employees now practice calculated mediocrity, doing exactly enough to not get fired, but never enough to get promoted. Promotion means responsibility. Responsibility means stress. Stress means suffering. Better to float in the middle, invisible and safe. Cars have lost their appeal too. 1 in 4 Japanese households, or 25.7%, do not own a car. That number keeps climbing. A total of 4,421,494 new cars were sold in Japan in 2024, marking a 7.5% year-on-year decrease. Young people aren't even getting driver's licenses anymore. The freedom of the open road means nothing when you have nowhere you want to be. In the 1980s, owning a car was essential for dating. You'd pick up your girlfriend, drive to the beach, create memories. Now, a 30-year-old programmer in Yokohama explains, a car costs 300,000 yen per year just to own. That's 300,000 yen I can spend on games, manga, and not leaving my apartment. Easy choice. Homeownership? Forget it. Parasite singles, as the media cruelly calls them, live with their parents well into their 30s and 40s. Those who do move out rent tiny apartments, refusing mortgages, haunted by memories of the bubble that destroyed their parents' generation. Speaking of that bubble, to understand today's Japan, you need to understand what happened in 1989. This wasn't just an economic crash. It was the moment an entire nation's faith shattered. Picture Japan in the late 1980s. They owned the world. Japanese companies were buying everything. Rockefeller Center for $846 million, Columbia Pictures for $3.4 billion, Pebble Beach Golf Course for $841 million. The grounds of the Imperial Palace in Tokyo, just 3.4 square kilometers, were valued higher than all the real estate in California combined. Let that sink in. A palace garden worth more than an entire American state? Everyone was getting rich. Taxi drivers were trading stock tips. Housewives formed investment clubs. Golf club memberships were selling for $3 million. There's a famous story of a Japanese businessman who bought Van Gogh's portrait of Dr. Gachet for $82.5 million, basically just to show he could. Companies were handing out bonuses that would make today's tech billionaires jealous. One securities firm gave new graduates signing bonuses of $200,000. Students were getting hired 2 years before graduation with guaranteed jobs. Companies would send them on all-expenses-paid trips to Hawaii just to ensure they didn't sign with competitors. It was insanity, and everyone thought it was the new normal. Then came 1989. The Bank of Japan, worried about speculation, raised interest rates from 2.5% to 6%. The bubble exploded. Not popped, exploded. The Nikkei stock index fell from 38,915 to under 15,000. Property prices collapsed by 70%. Commercial land in major cities lost 80% of value. Trillions of yen in wealth vanished overnight. People who thought they were millionaires discovered they owed more on their mortgages than their homes were worth. But the real fracture didn't happen in boardrooms or trading floors. It happened in living rooms as children watched their fathers come home defeated. These legendary salarymen who missed every birthday, every school play, who literally slept in their offices, who gave their souls to Toyota and Sony and Mitsubishi, got nothing, laid off, forced into early retirement. Their decades of loyalty counted for zero. One man who worked for a major bank for 30 years came home to tell his family he'd been let go with 2 weeks' notice. His son, then 14, later recalled, "That was the day I decided I would never trust any company with my life." The lesson that generation absorbed was ruthless. Effort guarantees nothing, loyalty is foolish, and dreams will destroy you. Those traumatized kids are now adults who call themselves the Satori generation, ironically using the Buddhist term for enlightenment. But this isn't spiritual wisdom, it's spiritual capitulation. There's a joke making the rounds in Tokyo that perfectly captures their philosophy. Working hard may not guarantee success, but not working hard guarantees peace. They're not trying to win. They've redefined the game so that not playing is winning. But wait, before we dive into the truly dark part about Japan's sexless marriages and demographic apocalypse, if you're finding this as fascinating and terrifying as we are, hit that subscribe button now, because what's happening in Tokyo today is coming to your city tomorrow. Trust me, you need to see where this goes. Nowhere is this philosophy of surrender more devastating than in relationships. According to a survey conducted in October 2023 in Japan, 46% of male respondents and 42% of female respondents who were married stated that they were in sexless marriages. Almost half of married couples aren't having sex at all. Not less sex, zero sex. The number one reason women give? It's simply just too much hassle, 22.6%, followed by tired from work, 20.8%. Sex, the fundamental biological drive that has kept our species alive for 300,000 years, has become a chore to avoid. Men report their wives treat physical intimacy like taking out the trash, something unpleasant that should be postponed as long as possible. Women describe their husbands as roommates who happen to share a last name. The bedroom has become the deadest room in Japanese homes. Across all age groups, 43.9% were in sexless marriages, while 24.3% said their marriages were nearly sexless. We're talking about nearly 70% of marriages where physical intimacy is either dead or on life support. But here's the brain-breaking twist. 57% of respondents who said they were in sexless or virtually sexless marriages also revealed that their relationship with their spouse was either good or fairly good. They genuinely like each other, They enjoy each other's company. But desire? That's been filed away with other outdated concepts like job loyalty and the American dream. The Japanese government is throwing everything at this crisis. Cash bonuses for babies, 15,000 yen per month for the first child up until the age of 3, and up to 1,000,000 yen for a third child in some local programs. That's serious money. Nobody cares. AI-powered matchmaking apps funded by taxpayers. Tokyo took advantage of the funds to create an app that requests a ton of personal information in order to screen out the unserious. The technology works perfectly. The algorithm is flawless. It has a success rate of less than 2%. You can't code desire into existence. They even tried paying women to relocate. The government offered urban single women 600,000 yen, about $4,000, to move to rural areas and marry lonely farmers. The backlash was instant and brutal. Women were furious at being treated like mail-order brides for dying towns. One woman posted online, "They want us to move to places with no jobs, no friends, no future. To marry strangers? This isn't matchmaking, it's human trafficking." The program died within weeks. Some prefectures have gotten desperate enough to host marriage hunting parties, konkatsu, where singles are forced to mingle in awkward, officially sanctioned events. Attendance is pitiful. Those who show up often do so only because their parents made them. Politicians keep missing the point. This isn't an economic problem, it's an existential one. You can't spreadsheet your way out of meaninglessness. The economic implications defy traditional understanding. Japan has maintained 0% interest rates for over 2 decades. The government has tried negative rates. They'll literally pay you to borrow. In 2020, they gave every citizen 100,000 yen in cash, no strings attached. They've printed money endlessly. Quantitative easing, stimulus packages, infrastructure projects that build bridges to nowhere. The result? Nothing. Over 50% of Japanese household financial assets sit in basic savings accounts. Not invested, not spent, just waiting. For what? Nobody knows. Japanese households are sitting on 1,000 trillion yen in cash and deposits. That's about $7 trillion doing absolutely nothing. Japan's GDP has flatlined since 1995. For 30 years, the world's third largest economy has existed in suspended animation. One economist described it perfectly. Pushing on a string. You could push money in, but without someone pulling on the other end, nothing happens. Consumer spending remains anemic because consumers have transcended wanting. Black Friday comes to Japan and nobody shows up. New iPhone releases that cause stampedes elsewhere barely create a line in Shibuya. Companies won't invest in a demand vacuum. Young people avoid risk because they've seen risk destroy everyone who took it. The economy isn't crashing, it's fossilizing. Meanwhile, the demographic apocalypse accelerates. Japan's population peaked at 128 million in 2010. It's already down to 122.9 million. Projections show 87 million by 2070. We're not witnessing population decline, we're watching a civilization evaporate. Rural Japan has already crossed into the post-human era. There's a village called Nagoro, where a woman named Tsukimi Ayano has replaced every departed resident with a life-size doll. There are now 350 dolls and 27 humans. She creates new dolls whenever someone dies or leaves. The school has doll students. The bus stop has dolls waiting for buses that no longer come. Schools are closing at 500 per year, 2 every single day, gone forever. In some regions, they're combining schools from multiple towns, with children commuting 2 hours each way because there aren't enough kids to justify local schools. By 2050, Japan will have 1 working adult per retiree. The mathematics of survival no longer compute. Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshimasa Hayashi called the ongoing declining birth rate critical. He said, "The period over the next 6 years or so until the 2030s, when the younger population will start declining rapidly, will be the last chance we may be able to have to reverse the trend. Last chance. Even the government admits the game is essentially over." But beneath this lies something even darker. The hikikomori phenomenon. At least 1.5 million people, mostly men, have withdrawn completely from existence. They inhabit childhood bedrooms for decades, never leaving, never working, never speaking to another human face to face. Their families leave food outside their doors, maintaining a fiction of normalcy around a living ghost. One mother in Chiba Prefecture hasn't seen her 38-year-old son's face in 5 years. He lives in his room, emerging only at 3 a.m. to use the bathroom and grab the food she leaves. She doesn't know if he's okay. She doesn't know what he does all day. She just knows he's alive because the food disappears. Even those not fully withdrawn are in retreat. Work, home, door locked. No friends, no relationships, no hobbies requiring human contact. They exist in digital spaces where failure is deletable and rejection can be blocked. Japan now has a thriving industry for rental family members, actors playing your girlfriend at company events or your son at reunions. Prices range from $200 for a 2-hour rental girlfriend to $1,000 for a full family at a wedding. One company, Family Romance, has 2,000 actors on call. The founder says business is booming. People want the appearance of connection without the reality of it. Men marry anime characters in legitimate ceremonies. Akihiko Kondo spent $18,000 on a wedding with Hatsune Miku, a holographic pop star. 39 actual humans attended, celebrating a union between flesh and pixels. When asked why, he said, "Miku-san never betrays me. She never ages. She never argues. She's perfect." They call this 2.5-dimensional love between fiction and reality. Perfect love without risk, disappointment, or negotiating dinner choices. In Japan, a friendship marriage refers to a marital relationship where two individuals come together primarily for companionship and mutual support, rather than romantic love or sexual attraction. These arrangements are now officially recognized. Marriage without romance or sex, purely for practical benefits. One couple explained their arrangement. "We're best friends who share rent and health insurance. Why complicate it with feelings?" The government keeps treating symptoms while the disease spreads. Ashiba didn't offer a lot of solutions at the meeting. However, he did allude to addressing the issue of temporary workers. More stability, more money, more programs. They're rearranging furniture in a burning building. This isn't about economics. It's about a society that's lost its reason to exist. The contagion spreads globally. In 2023, South Korea's birth rate was 0.72 children per woman, even lower than Japan's. They called it the ENPO generation, giving up on N number of things. Dating, marriage, children, home ownership, career ambitions, the N keeps growing. China's youth embrace lying flat, tang ping, rejection ambition entirely. "Why should I work hard to make my boss rich?" asks a 26-year-old in Shanghai. Europe and America show early symptoms: extended adolescence, marriage avoidance, birth rate collapse. Japan isn't behind. They're the vanguard, demonstrating what happens when prosperity fails to deliver happiness, when traditional motivations become meaningless, when a society solves all its old problems only to discover it has no idea what to do next. They had everything society supposedly need: safety, healthcare, education, functional infrastructure, low crime, rich culture. Their verdict? Pass. No revolution, no riots, just a collective quiet withdrawal from the entire human project. The physical manifestation of this surrender is visible from space. According to figures compiled by the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications, 14% of all residential properties in Japan are vacant. 9 million empty houses, more than the entire population of New York City. This akiya have doubled since 1993. Entire neighborhoods stand empty while occupied houses remain next door. Some villages have placed mannequins and dolls throughout town, creating theatrical presentations of life where none exist. In one heartbreaking case, they dressed mannequins in school uniforms, seated them at desks in an empty school because real children will never come. When elderly owners die, families can't afford demolition. Tax policies perversely incentivize decay. Vacant land is taxed 6 times more heavily than land with buildings, so houses rot in place, monuments to policy failure. Desperate towns offer houses for $500. Not a bargain, a scream for help that nobody hears. Some villages have tried giving houses away for free, still no takers. Who wants a free house in a dead town? When an earthquake or tsunami occurs, there's a possibility that vacant houses will block evacuation routes as they break down and get destroyed. The dead houses threaten the living during disasters. After the 2024 Noto Peninsula earthquake, Rescue teams couldn't reach survivors because collapsed IKEA blocked the roads. Even Tokyo, mighty Tokyo, harbors hundreds of thousands of empty homes. Million-dollar properties sit abandoned, ownership unknown or disputed, decay advancing while the city pretends not to notice. The Nomura Research Institute projects 30% vacancy rates within a decade. 1 in 3 homes are empty. That transcends crisis. It's civilizational abandonment. This is how worlds end, not with explosions, but with empty rooms multiplying, gardens returning to wilderness, roofs surrendering to gravity while mannequins stare from windows at streets where nobody walks. The IKEA perfectly symbolized the low-desire society. Empty houses for people who've emptied themselves of want, infrastructure for happiness, homes, schools, parks, waiting for humans who've forgotten how to hope. Next time you rage about American housing costs, remember Japan, where houses cost less than gaming consoles and nobody cares, where the government pays you to marry, to reproduce, to want anything, yet nothing changes. Kenichi Omei's insight remains striking. The Japanese have become afraid of hope itself, because hope requires vulnerability. Hope acknowledges imperfection. Hope admits tomorrow could differ from today, a thought too dangerous to entertain. They've chosen numbness over feeling, safety over experience, existence over life. The most terrifying aspect isn't their slow extinction, it's their apparent peace with it. The world watches mesmerized and horrified. Economists study it. Sociologists document it. Delegations arrive to learn what to avoid, but nobody has answers because the question itself is wrong. How do you cure people who don't want to be cured? Japan mirrors the developed world's future, and we recognize our reflection. Young people choosing screens over reality. Couples becoming cohabitants with shared bills. Workers who have internalized that advancement is an illusion. Parents questioning why they brought children into this. The symptoms manifest globally, just at different speeds. Japan simply reached the destination first, finish line in a race toward nowhere. The lesson might be that prosperity without purpose is toxic. That comfort without challenge equals death. That humans require something worth fighting for, or fighting itself becomes pointless. Or perhaps Japan sees clearly what we're still denying, that the entire structure we've built is absurd, and they're simply the first to stop pretending otherwise. The numbers are merciless. In 2024, the figure was 37,643 lower than the previous year. Births are dropping relentlessly, marriages vanishing, the population imploding, no solutions emerging. Japan faces no dramatic catastrophe, no invasion, plague, or asteroid. They're simply fading out, withdrawing one soul at a time until silence falls. The question isn't whether this spreads, it's spreading now. The question is whether Japan's example shocks us into transformation, or whether we follow them into that gentle darkness, having decided that not trying beats failing. What do you think? Is Japan's story a warning we'll heed or a preview of universal destiny? Are they the canary in humanity's coal mine, or the first to recognize the mine was always empty? Comment below. Subscribe to Fall of Nations for more impossible challenges facing our world, because if Japan, with all their advantages, can't solve this, what chance does anyone have? The future has arrived. It's just quieter than we expected. Beijing, January 2030. The latest graduating class, 15 million students, floods into a job market that collapsed 3 years ago. Youth unemployment has officially hit 35%, though independent economists estimate it's closer to 50%. But here's what makes 2030 different from 2025. The youth aren't protesting. They aren't demanding change. They're not even complaining. They're calling themselves rat people and celebrating the fact that they've given up entirely. Marriage rates have collapsed to near zero. Birth rates have flatlined. An entire generation lives with their parents, proudly doing nothing and turning unemployment into performance art. What you're about to discover isn't science fiction. It's the inevitable endpoint of trends that started in 2021, accelerated through 2025, and are racing toward this dark reality right now. Over 12 million fresh graduates flooded into a job market gasping for air in 2025, a record unmatched in recent history. Youth joblessness has refused to dip below crisis levels for over a year. The lying flat and let it rot movements have evolved from viral catchphrases into generational manifestos. This isn't just economic failure. This is the systematic creation of a lost generation that could bring down the world's second largest economy. And it's happening faster than anyone predicted. The countdown to 2030 has already begun. Let's start with the brutal reality that China's government tried to hide. In August 2023, something unprecedented happened. China simply stopped publishing youth unemployment data. Why? Because the numbers were so catastrophic they became a national security threat. The last official figure before the blackout? 21.3% youth unemployment in June 2023. That's 1 in 5 young people with college degrees who couldn't find work. But here's where it gets truly shocking. When China resumed reporting in December 2023, they used a completely new methodology that magically made the crisis look smaller. They excluded students from the count entirely. Convenient, right? Despite Beijing's statistical manipulation, unemployment among young Chinese has consistently hovered between 17% and 20% throughout 2024. And that's just what they're willing to acknowledge publicly. Independent analysts estimate the real number reaches 25 to 30% when you include underemployment and graduates working jobs that require no degree at all. Here's what should keep Beijing's leadership awake at night. 430,000 more desperate degree holders than 2024's already overwhelming flood, all competing for positions that exist only on paper. Think about that scale for a moment. That's more new graduates than the entire population of Belgium, all competing for jobs that simply don't exist. But the unemployment crisis is just the beginning of China's youth nightmare. Something extraordinary happened in 2021 that changed Chinese society forever. A young man named Luo Hongzhang posted a simple message on Baidu Tieba, one of China's largest online forums. His post was titled, "Lying Flat is Justice." In it, he described his decision to reject China's brutal hustle culture and live a minimalist life, doing only the bare minimum to survive. "I can just sleep in my barrel enjoying a sunbath like Diogenes," he wrote, "or live in a cave like Heraclitus and think about Logos." His post went viral instantly. Tang Ping, lying flat, became the rallying cry for millions of burned-out Chinese youth. But the government panicked. State media denounced lying flat as shameful and poisonous chicken soup. They deleted Luo's original post. They censored discussion groups. They even banned the sale of lying flat merchandise online. The crackdown only made the movement stronger. By 2022, a new, even more nihilistic phrase emerged: Bailan, let it rot. If lying flat meant doing the minimum, letting it rot meant actively embracing decline. Young people started posting things like, "Properties in Shanghai too expensive? Fine, I'll just rent all my life." Or, "Hard to find a job after graduation this year? Fine, I'll just buy lawn, stay home and watch TV all day." This wasn't passive resignation. This was an active rebellion against a system that had betrayed them. And it was about to get much darker. By 2025, the ultimate expression of youth despair had emerged: rat people. These aren't just unemployed youth scrolling aimlessly. Their lives unfold horizontally, curtains drawn, phones glowing, days melting together in digital limbo. They document their existence in tiny, darkened spaces, celebrating the art of achieving absolutely nothing. One young woman documented her 83rd consecutive day of staying in her bedroom, explaining how she convinced her parents that holding a job wasn't building wealth for myself. What makes this movement so dangerous isn't that it's fringe, it's that it's becoming mainstream. But wait until you hear what drove an entire generation to this point. China's youth crisis didn't happen overnight. It's the result of multiple disasters colliding at exactly the wrong time. First, the COVID-19 pandemic shattered China's economic growth model. GDP growth slowed dramatically, and young people bore the brunt of the downturn. Then came the government crackdowns that eliminated millions of jobs almost overnight. In 2021, Beijing banned for-profit tutoring, devastating the private education sector and eliminating tens of thousands of jobs that young graduates depended on. Around the same time, regulatory crackdowns crushed China's tech giants and real estate developers, the very companies that had been seen as dream employers for ambitious youth. Even the gig economy collapsed under its own weight. More than 200 million Chinese work gig jobs, but ride-hailing apps and food delivery services now have more drivers than they need. In some cities, authorities warned there were too many rideshare drivers chasing too few customers. Not even government jobs were safe. Local governments facing budget crises cut civil service positions, destroying the iron rice bowl of secure public employment that had been a backup plan for millions. Meanwhile, China's ivory towers kept churning out more degrees than the job market could absorb, like pouring water into a cracked bucket. In 2024, nearly 12 million new university graduates entered an economy that had no room for them. As one sociologist noted, roughly 25% of recent college graduates are stuck in low-paying jobs far beneath their qualifications. It's a massive waste of human capital and education, but here's the most infuriating part. China's expansion of higher education over the past decade doubled college enrollment, creating millions of youth chasing white-collar dreams that the economy simply can't fulfill. One 30-year-old with a master's degree told reporters that in 2021, she could get job interviews every day. By 2024, she hadn't had a single interview in a month. This is the reality facing China's youth, a perfect storm of economic stagnation, government interference, and impossible competition that has made their degrees worthless and their futures hopeless. But the economic despair is only part of the story. What's really breaking China's youth is the cultural and social collapse that's followed. Chinese youth aren't just rejecting careers, they're rejecting life itself. Meet the 4 no's generation. No dating, no marriage, no children, no home ownership. According to surveys in Guangzhou, 10% of urban youth openly plan to follow this lifestyle, completely abandoning traditional markers of adulthood. The statistics are staggering. What was once an informal safety net has transformed into a deliberate lifestyle choice. Urban family formation has all but evaporated. China's cities echo with weddings that never happened and children never born. This demographic decline has terrified Chinese officials who warn of long-term economic catastrophe if an entire generation opts out of family life. But from the youth perspective, this makes perfect rational sense. How can you start a family when you can't find secure work or afford housing? By lying flat in their personal lives, they're escaping what they see as unrealistic social pressures. As one online comment put it, the next step to look forward to is retirement, meaning young people already feel defeated and ready to withdraw from adult responsibilities entirely. This has created a new social phenomenon, full-time children. These are educated young adults who move back in with their parents and live off parental support instead of working. In exchange, they might do housework or care for aging parents, effectively making family member their full-time job. Once a source of shame, this has become increasingly common and even celebrated online. Some parents, flush from China's boom years, actually encourage it. As one researcher noted, millennials and Gen Z are the first generations in China who can afford to stay jobless and still survive. They half-jokingly call themselves Kenlao, those who gnaw on the elderly, embracing the idea of living off their parents indefinitely. In one viral case, a 21-year-old woman gained internet fame for declaring herself a full-time daughter after quitting her job. Her father even gave her an employment contract with a monthly stipend to stay home and keep him company. While meant humorously, these stories represent something much darker, a collective struggle from millions of young people who've concluded that if success is out of reach, they'll settle for comfort and dependency. But the most extreme expression of this youth withdrawal is still to come. If lying flat was passive resistance and letting it rot was active nihilism, then rat people represent the ultimate surrender. This movement exploded in early 2025 as unemployed young Chinese found community in celebrating ultra-minimalist existence. They post videos of themselves doing literally nothing, lounging in bed all day in dark, tiny rooms, scrolling on phones and ordering takeout. What started as sarcastic memes comparing aimless youth to lazy rats has become an embraced identity. These young people mock hyper-productive influencers who post 5 a.m. workout routines by glorifying the opposite, waking up at noon, staying in pajamas, and achieving absolutely nothing. One viral post showed the contrast perfectly. An American Instagram fitness coach bragging about a 4 a.m. run next to a Chinese rat person still lying in bed at 4 p.m., blissfully scrolling on an iPad. The message is clear. In a society obsessed with achievement, refusing to achieve becomes a form of liberation. Social commentators note that while this seems tongue-in-cheek, it reflects genuine frustrations. Many posting as rat people do so to cope with feelings of inadequacy. Seeing others publicly rot away makes them feel less alone about their own unproductive days. Some argue that only relatively privileged youth can afford to be rat people, those with middle-class families who can count on parental support. It doesn't mean they want to waste their life, one researcher explained. They're probably just taking some time off. But the normalization of complete withdrawal is unprecedented. These aren't just individual cases of burnout. This represents a cultural shift where an entire generation has concluded that participation in society isn't worth the effort. The government is watching this with growing alarm. If you're finding this deep dive into China's youth crisis valuable, consider hitting subscribe to Fall of Nations. Your support helps us continue bringing these important global stories to light. Now let's see how Beijing is desperately trying to fight back. Beijing's response to youth disillusionment reveals just how threatening they consider these movements. State media has published stern editorials insisting that struggle is the brightest color of youth and attacking the lying flat mindset as self-indulgent negativity that must be overcome. When the garbage time of history meme went viral in 2024, suggesting China's best times were behind us, authorities banned it entirely. State media condemned it as insinuating there's no hope and declared it more dangerous than lying flat for spreading hopelessness. Xi Jinping himself has repeatedly urged young Chinese to eat bitterness and serve the nation wherever needed, even if it means farm fields or factory floors. The government has tried both carrots and sticks. They've launched campaigns to create entry-level jobs, offered incentives for companies to hire graduates, and expanded vocational training programs. Some cities have provided stipends to unemployed youth or arranged mass job fairs. But the most telling response was their attempt to send urban graduates to work in rural areas. In 2023, the Communist Youth League encouraged jobless graduates to roll up their sleeves and go to the farmland. Young people responded with satirical memes of urban graduates posing wearily in rice paddies. As one researcher bluntly noted, the high unemployment rate will not encourage young people to work in the countryside because rural areas do not have the jobs they want. The disconnect between government solutions and youth reality couldn't be clearer. But perhaps the most desperate measure was simply hiding the problem. When youth unemployment data became too embarrassing, China stopped publishing it for 6 months. When they resumed, they changed the methodology to make the numbers look better. This cat and mouse game between authorities and youth has created a climate of cynicism, where even positive government initiatives are met with mockery. The trust gap between China's leadership and its youth has never been wider. Behind the statistics and memes are real young people whose stories illuminate the depth of this crisis. Take the gloomy graduates of 2023. As 11.6 million students graduated into one of the worst job markets in decades, they staged anti-celebration graduation photos, draping themselves limp over campus gates and tossing diplomas into garbage bins. Such dark humor revealed a generation that spent years studying only to face uncertainty. That same month, youth unemployment hit a record 20.8%. Then there's He Ajun, who transformed unemployment into internet fame. After losing her teaching job due to the tutoring crackdown, she became an unemployment influencer, turning economic failure into content creation. Ironically, she found a way to monetize unemployment itself, earning about $700 a month through ads, consultations, and crafts, proving that sometimes giving up on traditional employment can become employment itself. Another trend emerged from pure desperation: knowledge street vending. Highly educated young people set up roadside stands to sell intellectual services, a satirical twist on street food vendors. One viral photo showed a London School of Economics graduate in a busy Chinese city square with a cardboard sign offering consulting on Russia-Ukraine relations and modernization theory. Soon, others followed. Psychology graduates offering quick counseling sessions, literature majors writing poems for passers-by. This blend of humor and harsh reality represents creative attempts by jobless youth to feel useful despite being overlooked by the formal job market. City authorities have even loosened street vending rules to encourage entrepreneurship, implicitly acknowledging that not everyone will find corporate jobs. These individual stories paint a picture of a generation smart enough to recognize diminishing returns on effort and exhausted enough to stop trying entirely. But perhaps the most revealing voices come from those who've embraced lying flat as a philosophy. A 29-year-old named Sao Hang explained to reporters, "Unlike my parents' generation, we cannot make any long-term plans for our lives anymore because we do not know what is going to happen to us even 5 years down the road." After endless office failures despite hard work, he decided to do the bare minimum and stop stressing. His conclusion? Dropping ambitions was the only way to stay sane in a system designed for him to lose. Another young professional, Anna Wang, quit her bank job after enduring 12-hour days for minimal pay. "I was doing 3 people's jobs," she told Reuters, for only 6,000 won a month. Rather than cling to the iron rice bowl of state employment, she walked away and felt solidarity when she saw lying flat trending online. These aren't stories of moral failure. They're accounts of rational actors recognizing that the game is rigged and choosing not to play. The implications of China's lost youth generation extend far beyond individual stories of disappointment. What once passed for economic progress has corroded into generational paralysis. The psychological foundation that sustained China's growth, the belief that effort leads to advancement, has shattered completely. For decades, the Chinese Communist Party maintained legitimacy through a simple bargain: accept authoritarian rule in exchange for economic prosperity. As long as each generation did better than the last, people tolerated restrictions on political freedom. But now that bargain is crumbling. When an entire generation concludes that hard work doesn't lead to advancement, the psychological foundation of China's growth model collapses. The economic consequences are already visible. Entrepreneurship and innovation decline as youth opt out. Consumer spending stagnates as young people embrace minimalist lifestyles. The demographic time bomb accelerates as marriages and births are deferred indefinitely. Perhaps most dangerously, the lying flat mindset is spreading beyond youth. According to reports, even some private entrepreneurs and government officials are lying flat by not pursuing new ventures, further dragging down economic growth. But the political implications may be even more significant. Young Chinese increasingly see the political system as offering no meaningful channel for their grievances. Student activism is stifled. Independent organizations are co-opted, so they express dissent through withdrawal and sarcasm. Online, they've developed coded language to evade censorship. When authorities banned garbage time, young netizens referenced it in increasingly subtle ways, turning censorship itself into a form of resistance. The viral phrase, "we are the last generation," trending briefly after a video showed a young man telling police he refuses to carry societal burdens to the next generation, encapsulates this hopelessness about the future. The result is a sullen standoff. The state promotes patriotic struggle while youth quietly mutter, "let it rot," under their breath. This growing alienation between China's leadership and its youth represents a crisis of legitimacy that no amount of economic stimulus can fix. China's youth crisis isn't just a domestic issue. It's reshaping global economic and political dynamics. When the world's second-largest economy faces demographic collapse and a generational withdrawal, everyone feels the effects. Supply chains built on cheap Chinese labor become unreliable as young workers embrace rat people lifestyles. Consumer markets that depend on Chinese demand stagnate as an entire generation chooses minimalism over consumption. The brain drain is accelerating too. Applications for emigration hit record highs in 2024 as China's best and brightest seek opportunities abroad. Wealthy families send their children overseas and move their money with them. This represents both a talent loss and capital flight happening simultaneously, exactly what China can least afford during an economic transition. Meanwhile, China's traditional role as a manufacturing powerhouse faces fundamental challenges. The lying flat generation isn't interested in factory work, even as the country struggles to move up the value chain to higher skilled industries. The geopolitical implications are equally significant. China, dealing with massive internal youth unrest, may become more aggressive externally to distract from domestic problems, or more inward-looking and unstable. For countries that have built their economic strategies around Chinese growth and consumption, the prospects of a lost generation permanently withdrawing from economic participation represents an existential challenge to global growth models. This isn't just China's problem anymore, it's becoming the world's problem. Which brings us back to that dark scenario we opened with. Beijing, January 2030. 15 million graduates enter a job market where unemployment is openly acknowledged at 35%. But by then, the government has stopped trying to hide the crisis because managing it has become impossible. The Rat People movement has evolved into entire communities of young adults who've completely opted out of traditional society. Multiple generations live in extended family compounds, with grandparents saving, supporting adult children, and grandchildren who refuse to work. Marriage rates have effectively reached zero among urban youth. Birth rates have collapsed so completely that China's population is shrinking by millions per year. For millions of young Chinese, the cost-benefit analysis of adulthood simply doesn't add up. Why join a race when the finish line moves every year? The Communist Party maintains power through increasingly authoritarian control, but governs a society where the largest demographic group has effectively seceded psychologically from the system. This isn't inevitable, but it's where current trends lead if nothing changes. And based on everything we've seen so far, Beijing seems incapable of addressing the root causes of youth disillusionment. The evidence couldn't be clearer. China is creating a lost generation through its own policies and systemic failures. The lying flat and let it rot movements aren't just internet memes. They're symptoms of a society that has failed its young people so completely that millions have chosen withdrawal over participation. When a quarter of college graduates work jobs beneath their qualifications, when youth unemployment stays above 17% for over a year, when marriage and birth rates collapse, when an entire generation embraces doing nothing as a lifestyle, these aren't temporary setbacks. This is a systematic breakdown. The most tragic part? Much of this was avoidable. China's regulatory crackdowns on tutoring and tech eliminated millions of jobs unnecessarily. The expansion of higher education without corresponding job creation set up millions for disappointment. The 996 work culture and impossibly expensive housing made traditional success markers unreachable for most. But instead of addressing these root causes, Beijing has chosen to blame the victims, censor the symptoms, and hide the data. The government's proposed solution, sending graduates to rural areas, promoting patriotic struggle, offering modest job training, completely missed the scale and nature of the crisis. When millions of young people are essentially declaring psychological independence from your system, creating a few thousand jobs isn't going to solve the problem. China's youth have sent a clear message. The current system isn't working for them, and they're not going to keep pretending it is. The question now isn't whether China will have a lost generation. It's how large that generation becomes and how it reshapes Chinese society. Based on current trends, we're looking at potentially 200 to 300 million young Chinese who have fundamentally checked out of traditional economic and social participation. That's not just a demographic crisis. That's the end of the growth model that made China a global power. 2030 isn't some distant dystopia. It's next semester's graduation ceremony, where millions more will receive degrees that guarantee nothing. So what do you think? Are we witnessing the beginning of China's demographic collapse? Or can Beijing find a way to re-engage a generation that has essentially given up on the Chinese dream? Will this lost generation eventually find their way back to productivity and optimism? Or is this the new normal for a country that built its legitimacy on the promise of ever-improving prosperity? Let us know in the comments, and subscribe to Fall of Nations for more deep dives into the global trends that are reshaping our world. This is an Ikeya house. In Japanese, it literally means vacant house or empty home. And right now, there are over 9 million of them scattered across Japan, according to the most recent government housing survey. But here's the shocking truth. The Japanese government is so desperate to get rid of these properties, they're practically giving them away. Some are listed for as little as 50,000 yen. It's about $330. Free houses in one of the most expensive countries on earth? Sounds like the deal of the century, right? Well, not so fast. Because what you're about to learn is why almost no one, not even locals, is taking Japan up on this seemingly incredible offer. According to government data released in 2024, these abandoned homes now make up 13.8% of all housing in Japan, up from 9.8% in 1998. That's not some short-term anomaly. It's a decades-long collapse hiding in plain sight. 1 in every 7 homes across the entire country now sits completely empty, slowly being reclaimed by weeds, rust, and time. And the crisis is only accelerating. In rural villages, entire neighborhoods have gone eerily silent. The only sounds are the wind blowing through broken windows and empty doorways. And in some areas, the number of abandoned homes actually outnumbers the living residents. Ghost towns in Japan. In a country we usually associate with crowded subways and sky-high real estate prices, that should raise some serious red flags. So what's going on here? The answer is far darker than you think. Japan is going through a demographic collapse, one of the most severe ever recorded in a modern nation. While much of the world worries about overpopulation, Japan is shrinking fast. In 2024, the country recorded just 720,988,000 births, the lowest since records began in 1899, and over 1.62 million deaths according to official government statistics. That's not a slow decline. It's population freefall happening in real time. This is the same country that symbolized economic dominance throughout the late 20th century. It peaked at 128 million people in 2008. Today, it's already below 123.7 million. And projections from the National Institute of Population and Social Security Research suggest that by 2070, Japan could shrink to just 87 million. That's like erasing the entire population of California and Florida combined. Those 9 million empty homes aren't anomalies. They're warning signs of a deeper collapse that could change Japan forever. The connection becomes clear when you look at who's leaving and where they're going. Young Japanese are abandoning rural areas in droves, flocking to major cities like Tokyo, Osaka, and Nagoya, where jobs and opportunities concentrate. Meanwhile, the communities they leave behind grow older, emptier, and increasingly desperate. And Japan isn't just shrinking, it's aging rapidly. A staggering 29.3% of Japanese citizens are now over 65 years old as of September 2024. The highest proportion of elderly citizens in any country worldwide. By 2036, that number is expected to reach 33.4%. Imagine a country where 1 in every 3 people is at retirement age. That's Japan just 12 years from now. As elderly homeowners pass away in rural areas, their houses become orphan properties. Their children and grandchildren who've long since moved to cities like Tokyo have no interest in returning to maintain these ancestral homes in remote regions. Many of these abandoned houses aren't just sitting empty, they're becoming serious health and safety hazards. Without maintenance, they deteriorate quickly in Japan's humid, typhoon-prone climate. Rotting wood, collapsing roofs, and overgrown vegetation create dangerous conditions for neighboring homes. The Japanese government created a new legal framework to address this growing problem. In 2015, they passed the Special Measures Act for Vacant Houses, giving local authorities the power to identify, inspect, and even demolish dangerous vacant properties with the cost charged to the original owners. But demolition isn't cheap. Current estimates put the cost between 800,000 and 1.5 million yen, $5,300 to $10,000 to tear down even a modest Japanese home, up from previous years due to rising labor and disposal costs. With tens of thousands of properties requiring demolition each year, neither local governments nor private owners can keep up. So instead, they're practically begging people to take these houses off their hands. You might wonder why people aren't lining up to claim these nearly free houses. The reason is multifaceted, and cultural beliefs play a significant role. Many Japanese people avoid these abandoned houses because they believe they're haunted. Houses where someone has died, especially from suicide, murder, or lonely death, kodokushi, are considered stigmatized properties, or jikubuken. This isn't just a fringe superstition. It's a mainstream cultural belief so ingrained that it affects real estate markets nationwide. According to a 2020 survey by Sumo, Japan's largest real estate portal, approximately 69% of Japanese respondents said they would not consider living in a property where a death had occurred, regardless of the discount offered. Among those who would consider it, most indicated they would expect at least a 50% reduction in price. The stigma varies depending on the nature of the death. Natural deaths might lower a property's value by 10 to 20%, while suicides typically reduce values by 30 to 50%. Murders or other violent deaths can render properties virtually unmarketable, with value reductions of 50 to 80%. These cultural beliefs are so significant that real estate agents are legally required to disclose if a death occurred in a property. Once that disclosure happens, the value of the house can drop by as much as 50%. This legal obligation stems from a landmark 2006 court case where a tenant successfully sued a landlord for failing to disclose that a suicide had occurred in the apartment before they moved in. The disclosure requirement extends beyond the immediate property. If a death occurred in a neighboring unit in an apartment building or even in close proximity to a house, agents must disclose this information as well. This creates contamination zones, where entire neighborhoods can see property values decline after a tragic incident. Some real estate companies have begun employing exorcists to cleanse these properties before listing them. These spiritual professionals perform rituals aimed at appeasing any lingering spirits, allowing the property to be marketed as spiritually reset. This practice has become common enough that some real estate companies now include spiritual cleansing certificates in their property listings, assuring potential buyers that proper rituals have been performed. There's even a specialized real estate market that deals exclusively with jikobuken properties. Websites like Oshimaland, named after the Japanese word for stigma, catalog properties where deaths have occurred and offer them at steep discounts. These sites have gained popularity among pragmatic buyers who don't share traditional beliefs and see an opportunity to purchase properties at 30 to 50% below market value. The kodokushi phenomenon itself is heartbreaking and uniquely Japanese. Each year, approximately 30,000 elderly Japanese die alone in their homes, their bodies often undiscovered for days or even weeks. This tragic end has become common since the 1990s, resulting in a specialized cleaning industry to handle such properties, a reflection of Japan's aging society and changing family structures. Beyond cultural considerations, the economics of these properties present significant challenges. The true cost of an IKEA house isn't the purchase price, it's everything that comes after. Most of these abandoned houses haven't been updated in decades. They lack modern insulation, have outdated electrical systems, and often lack proper plumbing. The renovation costs quickly dwarf the purchase price. Take a typical IKEA in rural Japan. These homes were built between the 1950s and 1980s, primarily with wooden frames that haven't been maintained in years. Unlike American homes built with standardized materials and modern building codes, many of these properties were constructed using traditional methods that are costly to update to modern standards. Insulation is a particularly severe issue. Traditional Japanese homes were designed with the concept of feeling the seasons, meaning they were intentionally built to allow the occupants to experience the natural temperature changes throughout the year. This philosophy made sense in an era before climate control, but it means these houses are freezing in winter and sweltering in summer. Installing proper insulation might require removing entire walls and ceilings. Electrical systems present another major challenge. Many IKEA houses have outdated 100-volt wiring that can't handle modern appliances. The entire electrical system often needs to be replaced to meet current safety standards, especially in areas prone to earthquakes where old wiring poses significant fire hazards. Plumbing issues are equally daunting. Japanese bathrooms from the 1970s and earlier often featured traditional squat toilets rather than Western-style fixtures. Water damage is common in abandoned properties, and pipes may have burst during winter freezes, causing structural damage that's hidden within walls. Yosuke Tada purchased an IKEA in Aizu, Wakamatsu for just 310,000 yen, $2,000. The purchase price seemed like a bargain, but he ended up spending over 10 million yen, $66,000 on renovations. And that was with him doing most of the work himself. Hiring contractors would have doubled or tripled that amount. Even if you get an IKEA house for free, you're immediately responsible for property taxes. And while Japan's property tax rates are relatively low, about 1.4% of the assessed value, they apply whether you're using the property or not. The tax situation becomes even more complex for foreign buyers. While Japan imposes no formal restrictions on foreign property ownership, the practical barriers can be overwhelming. Non-residents must pay the same property taxes as Japanese citizens, but without access to many of the deductions and exemptions that locals enjoy. Japanese banks rarely lend to non-residents, and most IKEA are in rural areas where English is seldom spoken. The paperwork is notoriously complex even for Japanese citizens and often requires a Japanese bank account, proficiency in the language, and a deep understanding of local regulations. Property management becomes another hidden cost. If you're not living in Japan full-time, you'll need to hire someone to maintain the property and check for problems like leaks or storm damage. These property management services typically cost between 10,000 and 30,000 yen, $65 to $200 per month, quickly adding up to more than the purchase price of the house within the first year alone. Then there's inheritance tax, up to 55% of the property's value. Many IKEA exist precisely because heirs refuse to accept them, knowing they'd face tax bills they couldn't afford. When a property owner dies, their heirs have 10 months to pay the inheritance tax, which is calculated based on the property's assessed value minus any outstanding loans. For properties in remote areas where values have plummeted, heirs often discover that the tax bill exceeds what they could ever hope to sell the property for. This inheritance tax dilemma has created a peculiar situation where abandoning a property can actually be more economically rational than accepting it. While abandonment might seem irresponsible to Western sensibilities, in Japan it's becoming an increasingly common financial strategy among heirs who calculate that the long-term cost of ownership far exceed any potential benefits. These vacant houses aren't just a symptom of Japan's demographic crisis. They're accelerating the decline of rural communities. As houses sit empty, property values plummet. Local businesses lose customers. Schools close due to lack of children. This creates a vicious cycle hollowing out entire regions. In Wakayama Prefecture, villages exist where over 40% of homes stand abandoned. The few residents who remain are mostly elderly, with limited access to essential services. Emergency response times lengthen. Infrastructure deteriorates without enough taxpayers to fund maintenance. The village of Nanmoku in Gunma Prefecture offers a stark example of this decline. In the 1950s, it was home to over 4,000 residents primarily engaged in silk production. Today, fewer than 1,200 people remain, with over 60% of them aged 65 or older. Nearly half the homes in the village are unoccupied, and the last elementary school closed in 2014 after the graduating class consisted of just a single student. Similar stories are playing out across rural Japan. In Yabari, Hokkaido, the population has plunged from over 120,000 in the 1960s to fewer than 8,000 today. As coal mines closed and young people fled, the city accumulated massive debt trying to maintain infrastructure for a fraction of its former population. In 2007, Yubari became the first Japanese municipality to declare bankruptcy. This collapse creates a downward spiral that's nearly impossible to escape. As services disappear, more residents leave, further reducing the tax base. Basic necessities like grocery stores, medical facilities, and public transportation become unsustainable. In some villages, mobile services, grocery trucks, medical vans, and banking buses visit just once a week. Residents without cars must plan their entire lives around these limited schedules. The social isolation in these areas is profound. In the village of Sugito, a 2022 survey found that 42% of elderly residents reported speaking to another person less than once a week. As community bonds dissolve, the risk of kodokushi, lonely death, increases, creating more stigmatized properties and accelerating the cycle of abandonment. What we're witnessing is the slow-motion collapse of rural Japan. Cultural barriers also present challenges. Rural Japanese communities are tight-knit and often wary of outsiders. An American couple, the Mansfields, purchased an IKEA in Gifu Prefecture only to face months of neighbors who wouldn't speak to them. Local contractors refused to work on their renovations, and city officials repeatedly lost their paperwork. Their experience is not uncommon. Japan ranks among the most culturally homogeneous developed nations, with foreign residents making up less than 2% of the population. In rural areas, this percentage drops even lower, meaning foreigners stand out dramatically. The language barrier compounds these challenges. While English is widely taught in Japanese schools, it's rarely used in daily life, especially among older rural residents who make up the majority of these communities. For foreigners who do succeed in purchasing IKEA properties, integration into local community life presents ongoing challenges. Traditional Japanese rural communities operate on consensus-based decision-making through neighborhood associations, chonaikai, that govern everything from trash collection to festival planning. Participation in these associations is essentially mandatory for social acceptance. Yet meetings are conducted entirely in Japanese and follow unwritten cultural norms that can be difficult for outsiders to navigate. Some foreign buyers have adapted by embracing their role as cultural bridges. Canadian Alex Martin purchased an IKEA in Tottori Prefecture in 2018 and has transformed it into a guest house that hosts cultural exchange events. By explicitly positioning himself as someone who wants to preserve and share Japanese culture rather than change it, he's gained acceptance in his community, but acknowledges it took nearly 2 years of consistent effort. The Japanese government has attempted various solutions. In 2023, they expanded a program that offers up to 5 million yen, $33,000, to young families willing to relocate from Tokyo to rural areas, nearly doubling the previous incentive amount from 2019. This reverse urbanization initiative aims to redistribute Japan's shrinking population more evenly across the country, while addressing the critical housing shortages in Tokyo that persist despite the nationwide vacancy epidemic. Some innovators are trying different approaches. Alex Kerr, an American who purchased a 300-year-old thatched roof farmhouse in the remote Aya Valley back in the 1970s, painstakingly restored it and turned it into a guest house that now attracts visitors from around the world. His success inspired others to preserve traditional Japanese architecture. Kerr's model has evolved into the Chiori Trust, a nonprofit organization that purchases abandoned traditional homes, restores them using authentic methods, and repurposes them as cultural heritage sites, workshops for traditional crafts, or accommodations for cultural tourism. The organization has restored over 24 properties and trained hundreds of apprentices in traditional Japanese building techniques that were on the verge of being lost. Other entrepreneurs have developed innovative business models around IKEA revitalization. Hori Takafumi founded IKEA and Inaka in 2017, a company that specifically helps urbanites find and renovate abandoned rural properties. What makes this approach unique is the focus on community building. The company doesn't just sell houses, but creates networks of like-minded buyers who support each other through the renovation process and beyond. Technology is playing a role too. The IKEA Bank system has evolved from simple municipal websites listing available properties to sophisticated matching platforms using artificial intelligence to connect potential buyers with properties that meet their specific needs. Some platforms now offer virtual reality tours of properties, allowing potential buyers to explore remotely before making the journey to rural areas. Corporate Japan has also begun to take notice of the opportunity. In 2021, e-commerce giant Rakuten launched a dedicated IKEA marketplace on its platform, bringing the vacant house market into the mainstream. Traditional real estate companies like Sumitomo and Mitsui have established dedicated IKEA divisions, often partnering with local governments to create renovation packages that make the process more accessible to urban Japanese buyers. In 2023, the Japanese government launched a new digital nomad visa specifically designed to attract foreign remote workers. The program allows stays of up to 6 months for individuals earning above a certain income threshold who work for companies outside of Japan, a dramatic shift in policy for a country that has traditionally maintained strict immigration controls. Government officials have openly discussed how digital nomads could help revitalize abandoned rural properties. But despite these efforts, Japan's population crisis shows no signs of slowing down, and the scale of the challenge makes these programs feel like band-aids on a bullet wound. Adding to the complexity is the stark divide between rural Japan and Tokyo. While rural Japan has millions of unwanted houses, Tokyo continues to experience a severe housing shortage. In the capital region, even small apartments command astronomical prices, with the average price per square meter in central Tokyo reaching 1.9 million yen, about $12,500, in 2024, a 125% increase since 2013. It's a tale of two Japans, one where houses are practically given away and another where young families struggle to find affordable homes. This extreme geographical imbalance highlights how simply having enough houses nationally doesn't guarantee housing accessibility where people actually want to live. While Japan struggles with depopulation and abandonment, America grapples with artificial scarcity created by restrictive zoning. The average home in San Francisco costs over $1.3 million, not because America lacks land or building materials, but because regulations make it nearly impossible to build enough housing where people want to live. The abandoned houses of Japan offer a warning to other developed nations. They show us what happens when a society stops replacing itself, when cities grow at the expense of rural regions, and when cultural preferences change faster than housing stock can adapt. Housing isn't just about physical structures. It's about the legal, financial, and cultural systems we build around them. So the next time you see headlines about free houses in Japan, remember the dark truth behind those seemingly amazing offers. They're not generous gifts. They're symptoms of a profound crisis that has no easy solutions. What do you think? Could you see yourself moving to rural Japan to claim one of these houses? Or does this story make you more appreciative of your own home, wherever that might be? Let us know in the comments below, and if you found this video eye-opening, don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos that reveal the surprising truths behind seemingly simple stories. If you enjoyed this look into Japan's housing crisis, make sure to check out our video on Russia is about to disappear from the map. Demographics Crisis Explained next, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Thanks for watching.